Get started.
You're all set, Mayor, whenever you're ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 6th Township Committee meeting. Will you please join us and salute the American flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic
for
which
it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice for all.
Before we get started, I'd just like to have a moment of silence for Joseph Lauricia Jr., retired Maplewood code official and assistant building inspector who recently lost his life. He will be missed. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of municipal building, by mailing annual notice of regular meetings for 2021 to the news record and Star Ledger in December 2020, and by filing said notice in the office of the township clerk.
Ms. Adams?
Here.
Mr. Daffis?
Here.
Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Mr. Lindbergh?
Here,
Mayor McGehee?
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting. And whereas desire the governing body to comply with the provision of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner, now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee, Township Maplewood, does hereby prohibit, as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in deliberations of the governing body by the public, and except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observation of the actions and discussions of the governing body at all of its regular and special meetings.
so moved.
Second.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lindbergh?
Yes,
Mayor McGehee?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Fritzen, and good evening, everyone, again. I will briefly go through our agenda for this evening, and then we will move forward. Tonight, we have two proclamations on the agenda. The first one is regard to Sexual Assault Awareness Month. The second proclamation is regarding the Holocaust Remembrance. We will then move on to our Board of Health meeting led by Ms. Davenport and Deputy Mayor Daffis. Tonight, we have three ordinances on final, one regarding grease traps, the second regarding the move of our Division of Social Services to the Maplewood Health Department, and the third and final ordinance, the third ordinance on final is regarding vehicles and traffics and providing a parking space adjacent to Van Ness Terrace. We have two ordinances on introduction, both finance related. One is providing for various capital improvements for Township of Maplewood, and the second one is regarding the refinancing of a current bond. After that, we will not have reports from departments tonight. We will consolidate that into our discussion items. Mr. Kaloji, our CFO, has joined us for that portion of the meeting. But we will have administrative reports. We'll hear from Mr. Gimes, we'll hear from Mr. Desiderio, and we'll hear from Ms. Fritzen. We will then have reports from our elected officials. We'll first hear from Deputy Mayor Daffis. Following Deputy Mayor Daffis, we'll hear from Ms. Adams. And then after Ms. Adams, we'll hear from Mr. DeLuca. Then we'll hear from Mr. Lindbergh, and then myself. Tonight, we have 8 items or discussion items. They are including pool fees, lighting and park hours, venue rates, collection of demographic information for our recreation program. We'll have a Maplewood Library construction project update, amendments to our community board on police ordinance, a discussion regarding finance and our special emergency note, and an update on our waste consultant project. Our consent agenda has a total of, I want to say 19 items tonight. Oh, actually 24 items. And I'll briefly go through a few key ones. We have a awarding of a contract for the marketing of our recyclables for 2021. A contract providing trees for planting within our township. We're awarding a contract for the storage and management of our documents. We'll be appointing our municipal deputy emergency management coordinators. We'll be appointing a qualified purchasing agent, also known as a QPA. We'll be appointing a full-time laborer to our Department of Public Works and Shade Tree Division. We'll be appointing a part-time office assistant to the Department of Community Development. We'll be refunding tax overpayments, establishing our 2021 sewer rate, approving temporary capital budget, confirming the allocation of funds in the Municipal Open Space Trust Fund, emergency temporary appropriations, the application to the local finance board pursuant to NJSA 40A, payment to police officer Mark Ferraro, and then finally bills and claims. After that, we will have public comment, and then we will adjourn. So another robust agenda for us. We will first start our agenda with the proclamation on sexual assault awareness. And I will read this myself. Whereas nearly 1 in 5 women in the United States have experienced sexual assault or attempted rape at one point in their lives. And whereas sexual assault can happen throughout physical force, threats of force, or if the attacker gave the victim drugs or alcohol as part of the assault. Sexual assault includes rape and sexual coercion. And whereas the majority of sexual assaults happen at or near a victim's home, often by someone they know and or trust. And whereas only 5 out of 1,000 perpetrators will end up in prison. And whereas the crime of sexual assault affects people from all walks of life. These acts of physical brutality also leave survivors with emotional scars and have a destructive effect on the lives of victims, families, and friends. And whereas now, therefore be it resolved that the Township of Maplewood do hereby proclaim the month of 2021 April, Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we want to recognize the devastation caused by sexual assault and the continuing commitment to eliminate this crime. We are grateful to the professionals serving in healthcare, victim and human services, law enforcement, and criminal justice for their steadfast resolve against sexual assault, by also caring and supporting survivors. As a nation, we stand with the courageous individuals who have survived sexual assault and pledge our efforts to help future sexual assault victims. And we just want to say that we're obviously cognizant of some of the narrative in our community regarding sexual assault and some of our young people, and we stand with them in solidarity. Thank you. I'll now move on to our next proclamation regarding the Holocaust remembrance. And I'll yield the floor to Mr. DeLuca.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this is a proclamation for Holocaust remembrance, which is going to be on April 18th, sorry, Sunday, April 18th. And I'm just going to push up on the screen the promo for the event, and I'll read the proclamation. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systemic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1944, during which time 6 million Jewish people were murdered. And whereas the Nazi regime persecuted and killed another 6 million people it considered politically, racially, or socially unfit, including Polish citizens, Soviet prisoners of war, gays and lesbians, gypsies, mentally and physically disabled Germans, trade unionists, political dissidents, and Jehovah's Witnesses. And whereas ethnic, racial, and religious intolerance and hate are ever-present and growing threats to world peace, harmony, and understanding among people, and we encourage all to stand up and speak out against hatred and intolerance of all kinds. And whereas for 40 years, the clergy, civic organizations, and people of all faiths and backgrounds in South Orange and Maplewood have collaborated with spiritual, civic, and social strengths to produce the annual Remember and Tell Soma Interfaith Holocaust Service, which this year will take place virtually on Sunday, April 18th, 2021. Now therefore be it resolved that Mayor Frank McGehee and the Maplewood Township Committee do hereby proclaim the week of April 18th, 2021 as the Days of Remembrance, and urge all of our residents to participate in the Soma Interfaith Holocaust Service and promote human dignity and confront hate whenever and wherever it occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. We'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is our Board of Health meeting. I will yield the floor to Deputy Mayor Daffis.
Thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2021 to the News Record and Star Ledger in December 2020, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk. Clerk Fritzen, roll call, please.
Ms. Adams? Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Lembrick? Mayor McGee?
Here.
Mayor McGehee?
Here.
Mr. Daffis?
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231 Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires that all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the Board of Health has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting. And whereas desire of the Maplewood Board of Health to comply with the provision of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner, now therefore be resolved by the Maplewood Board of Health, Township of Maplewood, does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in the deliberations of the Board of Health by the public, and except as otherwise prescribed by law, those limits the public to the observation of the actions and discussion of the Board of Health at all its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Adams? Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes. Thank you, Clerk Fritzen. I now move the approval of the minutes from our March 2nd Board of Health meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes. Thank you again, Clerk Fritzen. Now I introduce, the mic is yours, Health Officer Davenport.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here for the presentation for this evening. Can everyone see the presentation slides?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So one of the things I wanted to mention before we move on, and I give you the overview of our cases for the month of March, is that we have new communication guidance that is posted on our website. If people go to the Township website at www.twp.maplewood.nj.us and go to our COVID-19 portal, we have some new communication updates for COVID that I think residents will find most helpful. So that's a good place to start for the ever-changing information that is out there. Just wanted to give you an overview thus far of COVID cases over the month of March. As you can see here, moving on from week to week, we have progressed from some areas of moderate community spread to, unfortunately, this is the week of ending March 27th. So we are back as a state as a whole in high. To give you an update for Maplewood, our total number of cases, of COVID cases, as of March 31st is 1,366. The number of cases for the month of March, we had 275 cases that we had to do contact tracing and case investigation for. This is an extremely high volume amount, probably one of the highest months that we've ever had. So I just want to reemphasize to everyone that we are not out of the woods yet with regard to COVID. In fact, with people moving around and the loosening of restrictions of activities and events, we're just seeing an uptick of cases. So I just want to make everyone aware that we are still seeing hospitalizations. For the month of March, we've had 5 new hospitalizations. And if you are not aware, 43% of our ICU capacity in Essex County, 47% of our ICU capacity in Essex County has already been used for COVID cases. So our hospitalizations in general across the state are up. And I want to just emphasize here the COVID cases in 2021. This is from January to April 5th of this month in Maplewood. The green dotted line is our trajectory. So our trend is upward, and it's an upward tick here. The blue line is our number of cases daily, and the orange line is our 7-day average. But again, it's just to illustrate the trending line of where our cases are going. I also want to look at the age distribution from January to March. In total, we had 621 cases from January up until the end of March. Please note that from ages 0 to 9 and 10 to 19 make up 23% of our total cases for this quarter. So want to say here that it is not that kids don't get it. We are seeing cases of kids getting it, and we just need to watch them as well. Also, please note that 50% of our cases are between the ages of 20 and 49. So that's where we're seeing a lot of our cases as well in Maplewood. Unfortunately, I want to bring to your attention that in the month of March, we did lose another resident to COVID, unfortunately, which brings our total number of deaths in Maplewood to 34. We can't emphasize enough then that testing and vaccination is super important. So we are providing through working with Salerno Medical, also known as the New Jersey COVID team. They are here providing testing services from April 5th to April 30th at Yale Corner, which is on the corner of Yale Street and Springfield Avenue. And they're here Mondays to Fridays, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Walk-ins are welcome, but you can also register on their website, which is listed here. They advise you to please bring your insurance card or social security card if you're uninsured, and they'll provide both COVID testing as well as antibody testing as well. If you can't make it there or would like to look at other options, there is always, thank goodness, the essexcovid.org website, which is free for all. They offer testing as well as vaccination. You can register on that website. It is a drive-through. And you can also go to the covid19.nj.gov page and look up testing sites for more information. That would list every testing site, private and commercial. Speaking of vaccinations, just wanted to bring your attention to Essex County has now vaccinated a total of 360,877 persons, doses administered, as of April 5th. These are vaccinations provided through the state health department, whether through state and county clinics or through allocations through the state health department. On the state COVID-19 dashboard, they also provide this information by demographics. So if anyone is interested in that, as well as by the type of vaccine provided. Moving on, as everyone knows, there's always an expanding eligibility update. So we wanted to bring that attention to you that as of April 5th, which was yesterday, more people will be eligible, ages 55 and up, and all of these other categories are now open and available. So please register oneself for vaccination. But I want to bring your attention to the upcoming eligibility change for those who are 16 and over. As of Monday, April 19th, all individuals ages 16 and older will be eligible for vaccination, for COVID vaccination. However, the only vaccine that is available for 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds is the Pfizer vaccine. So please note that if you are looking to get your child vaccinated and they are 16 and 17 years old, They are only eligible to get the Pfizer vaccine. Anyone else for the Moderna or Johnson & Johnson vaccine that is approved for 18 and over. We're also expanding our services. Maplewood and South Orange are working with Salerno Medical to provide the vaccinations to the homebound residents. So that'll be happening in the next week or two. So we're grateful for that, and using our funds from the Vulnerable Populations Grant to provide that service. Additional vaccination resources can be found on these two websites, again, essexcovid.org to register for a vaccine, as well as covid19.nj.gov for additional vaccine locations outside of the county facilities. Another bit of good news is that the county is providing a senior-specific COVID vaccine site in Newark at the Stephen Adubato Sports Complex. And the township is working with the county to provide this. It is county coordinated and free for all seniors. This is optimal for seniors who are 65 and older who may not have access to a computer or are unable to navigate the online vaccine scheduling system. Also for those who have not received a vaccine yet and who may not have transportation or mode of transportation or someone to bring them to a vaccine clinic. The township will provide transportation to you. And we have a small amount of scheduling slots available for Maplewood weekly. We have about 14. So if people would like to register, please call the Maplewood Health Department at this phone number to our Vulnerable Populations Coordinator, and we will schedule you to get a vaccine for seniors and schedule transportation for you. Additionally, NJ Transit has this new website where they help you find the public transportation to use to get to all the vaccine sites across New Jersey. There's been great relief and happiness when people get vaccinated, and now they want to know what can be done and what can we do now that we've been fully vaccinated. So the State Health Department and the CDC have put together this very nice infographic regarding what fully vaccinated people can do. They can visit fully vaccinated people without having to wear a mask or social distance, and they can visit unvaccinated people from a single household who are at low risk. But as always, we always ask people until we reach herd immunity to please wear a mask, maintain social distancing, and avoid crowds and wash your hands often. Travel is another benefit of being vaccinated. Here are the two guidances for travel guidance. One is for fully vaccinated, as well as those who've had COVID infection and have recovered. If you travel within the first 3 months after recovery, you qualify in the darker blue box. Those who have been fully vaccinated no longer have to, and can travel within the United States, no longer have to self-quarantine or get tested before or after travel. If, however, you have not been vaccinated yet or have not completed your full vaccination schedule, the State Health Department still advises to do the 7 or 10 day modified quarantine for travelers. Along with travel, there is always the concern of contracting a variant form of the virus. As you can see here in on this graph from the State Health Department COVID-19 dashboard, there have been 918 cases of variants in the state of New Jersey thus far. As you can see from Essex, we have quite a bit of cases that have shown variants with B117. Some of you may know that as the one coming from UK. And we also have other variants in Essex County, which is the P1. As you can see there, there's that little red line there. And then the blue line is B12526. So B1526 is the other one that we are seeing in Essex County. And again, the state recommends, if you can avoid non-essential travel at this time if you're unvaccinated, that would be helpful. But because of the risk of bringing back variants, travel is still discouraged if possible to avoid it. Lastly, there's indoor and outdoor capacity guidance that has been updated. So we do want to make a note that our outdoor and indoor venues numbers and capacities have changed. But in general, if anyone has any questions about indoor and outdoor gatherings, general indoor gatherings is recommended to be limited to 25 people. And then general outdoor gatherings are currently limited to 200 people. And at that point, social distancing must still be practiced in both cases. Moving on to our environmental health report, I just want to emphasize that at the health department.
Report.
Oh, yes.
Can I stop you there? I
Sure.
think it's a good pivot point to
Sure.
before you pivot to this. Are there any questions from the rest of the committee for Health Officer Davenport as it relates to COVID, transmission, vaccinations, et cetera?
Thanks, Mr. Daffis, and thank you, Ms. Davenport. I don't have any questions per se. I think it's important to show, as she's already covered, like the availability of the vaccine. The Pfizer was a good point for 16 over. I think there was a little bit of disconnect in our public about who was eligible last weekend. And now we kind of are now 2 weeks later from everyone being eligible.
Mhm.
So I think that's a good takeaway. And then of course, as you're fully vaccinated, because I think our town is being very assertive and aggressive about getting vaccinated. I think those points about what you can and cannot do or should not do while being back, that slide there is something that we should definitely share, broadly, just to know where we stand. Yeah.
We can definitely post that up on our webpage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Member DeLuca?
Thank you. Just a couple things. Tuesday is my vaccination volunteer day. So I've been doing this for over 2 months. And tomorrow at both Livingston and West Orange, they're going to start the Johnson & Johnson. So I just want to let people know that if you have a Moderna vaccination scheduled, that would be in the morning before 2 p.m. And if you have a Johnson & Johnson scheduled, that will be after 2 p.m. and into the evening or late afternoon. So it starts tomorrow. It could be a little hairy because people do come. If you've been there, they come all different times, but there's going to be 2 distinct shifts. One's going to be the Moderna, which will require a comeback in 28 days, 4 weeks. The other will be the Johnson & Johnson, which is a one-shot deal. So it's very important that before you go, know what vaccination you're getting, because that's going to determine whether you are in the AM group or the PM group. And the other thing, just from my own observation, I know I've been saying this in the beginning, I would say that 98% of the people coming there were white or white and Asian. That has changed. There are more African Americans coming, more Latinos coming. Not in a number that needs to be, but there are more than in the past. So some of the outreach to communities of color, some of the expansion of vaccination eligibility has brought in more people of color, which is a good thing.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Mr. DeLuca. Just want to emphasize that the J&J, as you had mentioned, increases the amount of scheduling and slots available. So this is a really good thing. That scheduling of before 2 p.m. is Moderna and after 2 p.m. will be J&J is super important. Also want to emphasize that Shahira Morel, who is one of our VPOC grant employees, and also our REHS, through her Spanish translations, we were able to reach out to extra supermarket staff and inform them about all of this stuff. So we are trying to make an effort to reach out to vulnerable populations. So thank you. I'm glad to hear that you're seeing more people at Essex site.
Ms. Davenport, do we have, I know our numbers are going up, we talked about this. Do we have any information about some of the variants that are out there? I think the B117, and there's another one, I think so. Do we know do we have any correlation at all that our numbers are, is there a direct correlation? Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah.
We have not been requested by the state health department to test. They don't test everyone. They only test specific ones. So specifically, they'll test someone who has had their 2 vaccinations, but then has a breakthrough, or has been traveling and indicated that they've gotten a variant. Those are some of the cases that they choose and pick and choose. And then through this selection process, they can identify how many they're seeing in one location. So, but I can't tell you for Maplewood specifically, because we've never been asked to test. But personal healthcare providers could also put in a test to the lab for variants if they wanted to.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So I have a couple of things I wanted to follow up with you, Health Officer Davenport, if you're willing. There's a question that came in through the chat here, and we'll have a public question portion, but since we're on this in particular, asking if, are you aware of B1526? Is that the so-called New York City variant?
Yes, so if you look on the screen, the blue section is B1526. So we are seeing that across New Jersey and in Essex. I'm sorry, I can't remember if that is the New York one, but that blue bar in Essex is B1526, which unfortunately, I don't know why on the dashboard it doesn't appear there, but that's when you hover over it on the dashboard, that's what it is.
Okay. And what would you say to the community in light of our high transmission in our community, which mirrors the rest of the county, the entire state, frankly, when compared to other states right now? On the one hand, we're doing such a good job of vaccinating people, but on the other hand, our transmission is really going not in the right direction. How do you account for that, and what is your advice?
So we are at a crossroads, right? Where we are pretty much racing against time, racing against the variants and them spreading widely. Unfortunately, that's one of their signature things about the variants is that they can spread much more quickly, excuse me. But I can't stress enough that people, I think are excited to get vaccinated as the eligibility criteria opens up. More people get vaccinated as more options for the vaccine are coming out, like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that enables more people to get vaccinated. But we really have to keep drumming it into people that we are not out of the woods yet. We still have to try to limit our social gatherings as much as possible. Stick to your pods or your small groups. I think what people need to emphasize right now, is that when you are fully vaccinated, and your friend is also fully vaccinated, you can see them. You can spend time with them, maybe time you didn't get to spend with them before, family members that you haven't seen in a long time. These are really good things, and we're moving in the right direction in that sense. But if we continue to, throw caution to the wind and not wear face masks and continue to go out in large groups or gatherings without being fully vaccinated, it can cause more transmission, unfortunately.
That's good to know, and thank you for answering that question. So along those lines, why do folks who have been fully vaccinated plus 14 days, why are they still recommended at this juncture to wear a mask in public and practice social distancing?
So that's a great question. A lot of people have that question. Until we reach herd immunity, unfortunately, the vaccine is, let's take the Pfizer and the Moderna. They're 94, 95% effective. The Johnson & Johnson is now found to be about 85% effective. So they do have a high efficacy rate. That means that if you get exposed to COVID, most likely you will have immunity and not get it at all. Or you might get a small symptom, milder symptoms, and not get sick and be hospitalized and have further unintended consequences. So by vaccinating, it prevents that. However, they're not perfect, right? It's not 100% efficacy. So you can be exposed to someone who has COVID, be vaccinated. And unfortunately, when you have a mild symptomatic infection, it'll seem like a cold, or be asymptomatic without wearing a face mask or without practicing social distancing, unfortunately, you can still transmit it to someone who is unvaccinated. And there's still too many people who are unvaccinated for us to say that we've reached herd immunity, where in our normal transactions, everyone is protected. We're not at that point yet. So that's why we have to protect others who still haven't made it to get vaccinated yet with the face mask and social distancing. I hope that answers your question.
It does. So until we get to herd immunity. So then going back to testing, can you tell folks why it's critical to continue testing, especially for those who may have been exposed to someone who tested positive, testing still being one of the key ways that we can mitigate community transmission?
Right. So one of the benefits or reasons why we brought the NJ COVID team back here into Maplewood at this particular juncture is because we knew people were coming back from spring break, right? Not only our district, but every district. So if you're traveling or you've been exposed to someone with COVID, it is super imperative to get tested so that we know if you're positive, the health department can contact you and provide you with guidance on how to isolate and quarantine safely.
Terrific, thank you. If there are no other questions from the committee, my colleagues, then we'll move on to the rest of your report. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll continue on. Sorry. Oops. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that in Maplewood, we have ordinances for responsible pet ownership, in particular quality of life maintenance for our domestic pets, our dogs and cats. So I'm going to just refer to the dog part. Please, to our residents, please pick up your pet waste. I know we talked about this at the last meeting, and we do have signs that we can put up, and we have put up around town to remind people to pick up their pet waste. But in particular, please do not use the enclosed tennis courts in our parks as a pet run. And if you are in there or around the area, please pick up your pet waste just to be good stewards of our park system. Likewise, there is a leash law, which says that in public spaces like our township parks, dogs need to be on a leash that's 6 foot long. We ask that people abide by this in our public parks. They are not dog runs and they are not enclosed dog runs. So there is a risk that as friendly as your dog might be, there could be altercations that can happen with another dog or with another resident unintentionally. So please abide by the pet waste and leash law in Maplewood. Finally, I just want to bring up, oops, sorry. Oh my gosh, where did it go? Sorry. There was a PowerPoint. Let me just see if I can bring it back here.
Take your time.
Okay, can you see that?
Not yet.
Can you see? Not yet. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I hope Ms. Adams is on the call now because we're both on the Environmental Advisory Committee. And
Yep.
Hi, okay, Earth Day is April 22nd. So that's something really great to look forward to. And of course, we are going to renew our Maplewood Rahway River cleanup for this year on Saturday, April 24th. So we hope that our township's residents and families and friends will come out to assist us with making the earth a better place.
Well, I have good news on that, Ms. Davenport. I was visiting with some Girl Scouts recently, and usually we have Boy Scouts. We're having Girl Scouts this year. I have two Girl Scout groups coming. So they'll be there.
That's great news.
Yep.
Yeah, making more younger stewards for the future.
Absolutely.
So that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport. Okay, with that, we'll go to public comment. Are there any members of the public, Mr. Michalowski or Mr. Waltz, with questions for the Board of Health?
All right, guys, I got a couple here. First up, Miss Joan Crystal, you have 3 minutes.
I have a quick question. If you have been fully vaccinated, should you still be tested from time to time?
Oh, hi, Chris. Hi, Joan. This is a great question. No, you do not have to be tested at this time. Once you're fully vaccinated, we are going to assume immunity. How long that immunity lasts for, however, because this is a new vaccine, we are still not sure yet, but we're considering that you are fully covered and no need to test. However, I take that back. Let me just preface that if you've been in contact with a positive COVID patient, you don't have to quarantine. But if you begin to show symptoms of COVID, at that point, even if you're vaccinated, we ask that you go and test and quarantine until you get the test results.
That was a great question, by the way.
Any other questions from the public?
I don't see anyone else, guys.
Okay. I guess with that, we are going to adjourn this Board of Health meeting and meet again on May 4th. I move that we adjourn.
Second. You're on mute, Ms. Fritzen.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Lembrick,
Yes.
Mary McGehee,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, thank you, Clerk Fritzen. Mayor, the Zoom is yours again.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Davenport. Have a wonderful evening, Ms. Davenport. We'll now move on to agenda item number 8, which is public comment, limited to 3 minutes on agenda items only. Nick, do we have anyone who would like to address the Township Committee on agenda items only?
Hey, Mayor,
Sorry, Ms. Adams.
the Summit City Council meeting I had to hop off to had 95 panel attendees. You want to know why? They're talking about leaf blowers.
You got out right on time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've already lived that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, everyone. First up, Miss Susan Bergen. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Yes. Hi, good. Thank you.
Excuse me, can we do the practice we did last meeting of having the video come on?
Yeah, I think that's by, Ms.
I agree.
Bergen, she has to show her video
Okay.
if you want.
No, I can. It didn't give me the option initially.
Oh, okay.
But I can now.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Susan Bergen. Tonight, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Board of Ed. I'm here as a Maplewood resident who has served on the Maplewood Recreation Advisory Committee for over 2.5 years. One of my goals in joining the committee, which is shared by some of my fellow committee members, is to help see that the town's recreation programming is accessible to everyone in our community. Each month, the committee meets and gets a detailed update on rec department programming. About 2 years ago, I asked for demographic information about who participates in the programs we were discussing. It seemed like an obvious question. How else would we know if the programs were serving everyone? How would we know where to target our outreach? We had hopes of fundraising for the Recreation Assistance Fund. Having data on who was, and by extension, who was not participating, would be key to fundraising and determining where to advertise our financial assistance. 2 years later, we're not in a better position to answer those questions. I recognize that the town can't compel residents to disclose certain information when registering for programs, but the demographic questions would be voluntary. And even without everyone responding to them, we would have much more information to work with than we do right now. I know it will take time to build up this information, but I think that is the reason to start now before more years go by, and not a reason to give up altogether on using data to inform the recreation programming initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bergen.
Thank you.
Okay, gang. Next up, I think Glenn transferred them over. Hold on 1 sec. Miss Heather Soslavsky, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. I am similarly here as a member of the RAC. I believe that it is in line with the rec department's goal of fun for all, that we actually understand whether or not we're reaching all of our community. We need to know if we're reaching all segments of Maplewood's population. We currently do actually track data for gender, but we don't track data for race or income or a number of other very obvious questions that almost everything you've ever signed up for in the last probably 5 to 10 years, you've been asked to voluntarily respond to. We've been asking, as Susan said, for quite some time, I believe about 2 years now, that REC start collecting that data, that it be fully optional, that on every question there be a prefer not to answer selection. We've been told a few different things, from discomfort on the department's behalf of asking the questions, particularly regarding race. At one point, I actually sought out a nonprofit to provide iPads to the department. And then because of COVID, we didn't proceed with that because we didn't want the staff to have to ask the questions directly, given their discomfort, although I think that's a separate issue that maybe should be dealt with as well. I don't think asking someone their race is something that should be uncomfortable for our staff. Anyway, so we've continued to ask, and ultimately, after being told we needed to come up with the questions, and we debated what those wording would look like to make everybody most comfortable, it turned out that Rec Desk has this available. They just have to turn it on in the back end. It's already available to the department, and it sounds like it's literally just clicking something on the back end to ask these questions that are already built in. They're there, they're available. We should be collecting this data. We should be analyzing it to see who we're reaching, so we can make better outreach and reach more of our community, and hopefully also fundraise for those who otherwise would have difficulty accessing our programs. Thank you for having this on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Slawski. Appreciate that.
Okay, everyone. Next up, Miss Melissa Rennie. You have 3 minutes.
I think I know how to unmute by now. Hey, everybody. My name is Melissa Rennie. I am a Maplewood resident, and like Susan and Heather, I am also here to speak on my support for collecting racial demographic data by the township. I'm a Maplewood resident. I'm also a member of the Pool Advisory Committee. And I think one of the reasons I joined the Pool Committee was, in joining the pool and in going to lots of other township activities, I was often surprised actually by the lack of diversity at those township-sponsored activities, whether it's softball or, the pool or other events. And I think that, we pride ourselves on diversity as a town, but we are often not integrated. And I think that really collecting this data will help us to understand which of our programs are serving all of our residents. One of the reasons I joined the pool committee was to help to increase access to the pool for more Maplewood residents. But again, we don't have the data that we need to understand which Maplewood residents we are serving with the pool and with our other township programs. Collecting this data will help us to better understand which programs that we have are currently serving all Maplewood residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rennie. Appreciate it.
Okay, everyone. That seems to be everyone.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, we'll now move on to closing public comment. We'll now move on to agenda item number 9. We have an ordinance on the final.
Yes, Mayor. Ordinance number 3021-21, an ordinance to supplement the code of the Township of Maplewood by adopting rules and regulations applicable to grease traps.
This ordinance has been published. Copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Would anyone in the public like to speak on grease traps? Seeing none, thank you, Nick. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Can I get a motion, Mr. Daffis?
Yes, Mayor, I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say, I think it's the best line so far tonight. Anyone want to speak on grease traps?
We got time.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
Lots of time. All right, hearing none, we'll close our hearing. Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We have our second ordinance on final.
Mayor, item number 10, ordinance on final, ordinance number 3022-21 is an ordinance to move the Division of Social Services to the Maplewood Health Department. This ordinance will move the Social Services Division from the Department of Community Services to the Department of Health.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Would anyone from the public like to speak on moving the Division of Social Services to the Maplewood Health Department?
I don't have anyone there.
Thank you, Nick. Hearing none, we will close public comment. Can I get a motion, Mr. Daffis?
I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We have our third ordinance on final.
Yes, Mayor, it's item number 11, ordinance on final passage, ordinance number 3023-21. It's an ordinance to amend Chapter 257 of the Code of the Township of Maplewood entitled Vehicles and Traffic. This ordinance will designate a disabled resident-only parking space adjacent to the property at 62 Van Ness Terrace.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Would anyone in the public like to speak on this disabled resident-only parking space allocation?
I got no one there.
Thank you, Nick. Hearing none, we'll close the hearing. Can I get a motion, Mr. DeLuca?
Yes, Mayor. I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will close discussion, and Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We now have a couple ordinances on introduction.
Yes, Mayor. Item 12 on introduction, ordinance number 3024-21. Bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements of the Township of Maplewood in the County of Essex, New Jersey, appropriating the aggregate amount of $6,458,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $6,172,000 in bonds or notes of the township to finance part of the cost thereof.
I will move this myself. I move the passage of this ordinance on first reading, its publication in accordance to the law in the Maplewood South Orange News Record, and a hearing to be held on April 20th.
I second.
Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We have our second ordinance on introduction.
Yes, Mayor, it's item 13, ordinance number 3025-21. Also introduction of new ordinance. Refunding bond ordinance of the Township of Maplewood in the County of Essex, New Jersey, providing for the refunding of all or a portion of certain general improvement bond and certain pool utility bonds of the township, appropriating $4,250,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance by the township of refunding bonds in the aggregate principal amount of not exceeding $4,250,000 for financing the cost thereof.
Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. I'll move this as well. I move the passage of this ordinance on first reading, publication according to the law in the Maplewood South Orange News Record, and a hearing to be held on April 20th.
Second.
And we will discuss this ordinance more in the discussion items this evening. Ms. Fritzen, can you please call the roll?
Well, I'm sorry. Can we have Mr. Kaloje describe this? This is a refunding of a bond and a saving of interest.
Right. Yes. We're going to talk more. Well, we can talk a little bit about it now, Mr. Close, you like to, and then we'll have a little more robust conversation during discussion items. So
Yeah, I think it makes sense to hear about it before we vote on it. I mean, even though it's first reading.
all right. I mean, obviously, it has to go through final too. So the idea is that even if you pass it, it still has to go through final. But happy to yield the floor to Mr. Kaloje.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So ordinarily, when bonds go to market, typically the first usually 5 years of a bond are locked in, where we can't do anything other than pay our principal and interest, and that's in order to make sure that investors are getting some sort of return. Typically, towards the tail end of any bond issuance, there's the ability to refinance it, which in technical terms is called a refunding bond. This particular bond, for whatever reasons, is a 2011 bond. It stretched all the way out to this year. This was the first year that we were able to actually look to refund it. There's still 5 years left on the payment of it, but based on how the bond was sold and the interest rates that were established and the current market value for bonds, I reached out to our financial advisor, who crunched the numbers and said that essentially we can save ourselves 5% over the course of the next 5 years. That would come out to the tune of roughly $200,000 in interest payments. So roughly saving $40,000 a year. In order to do that, we need to pass this ordinance so that we can go out. There are 2 mechanisms by which we can move forward with this. We can either put it out on the open market, which would require us to get a bond rating and would also require us to get an official statement. And both of those things cost money. Or we can seek out RFPs through banks and have the bank purchase the bond itself, essentially a bank loan, for lack of a better description. There are pros and cons to both options, but regardless, the number we're looking at is roughly $200,000 over the next 5 years. Statutorily, we need to save at least 3%, and again, the calculations came out at 5%. So we're well within our range. We just need to move this forward so that we can get it in front of the local finance board for a final approval.
Thank you, Mr. Closer. And that's also covered in the memo that was shared with the whole body. And it's we're trying to save money, not just this year, but every year. So that's why we wanted the finance committee says, put this on the agenda, let's move it.
And Mr. Kaloje, this is the bond that we did years ago for the improvements to the pool, for the slide and the pool patio, the pool cement there around the pool. Is that correct?
Yes, a small portion of this bond includes that pool ordinance, correct.
Okay, because I think this impacts our discussion later about the pool fees, because part of the reason we raised the fees was to pay off this bond. So if we're relieving some pressure on our interest payments going forward, that should relieve some pressure on the pool fees just to cover this capital cost.
Well, that's a fair point, Mr. DeLuca. I mean, when we looked at it from the finance committee, we weren't looking at the pool fees. We were just looking at ways that we could obviously reduce our debt. And this is a way to save, not a tax point, but close to one. So, but duly noted. So when we do have that discussion item, we should have that part of the conversation. So we're looking for every penny under every couch. So any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lembrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. We'll now move on. Actually, we're going to skip agenda item number 14. We'll hear more from Mr. Close during agenda item 17, our discussion items. We talk about the special emergency note. We'll cover two of the remaining 3 financial points. But we'll now move on to agenda item number 15, which is our administrative reports. And we'll first hear from our Township Administrator, Mr. Gimes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just touch on a few things that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks and some meetings I had, and also touch on an agenda item or 2 that's coming up to give some more clarification. First off, the finance officer, CFO Joe, and I, along with the finance committee, have been working diligently on the budget, and we hope to have something prepared for your final review at some point shortly. I agree with all the CFO's recommendations as it relates to bonding, refunding bonding, and going to the local finance board. And based on his analysis, I don't see any issue with getting the approval from the local finance board for the bond that we're looking to do. As it relates to the phone audit, we were solicited by a company called Spyglass that wants to come in at no cost and do a look at our phones to see where and if we can save any money. There's been a lot of work on that Glenn has done already, but bringing in a second set of eyes doesn't hurt. And we're not sure they're going to find much, to be honest with you, based on the work that's been done by Glenn, but it's not going to hurt to bring it in. And if there's a savings, as we said, trying to turn over every cushion, we'll take advantage of it. If not, there was no harm to us. I had a meeting last week with some members of the Community Board on Police. We talked about the crisis intervention team and how that might be handled and managed between the various stakeholders in the community. Since that meeting, I've done significant research, reached out to communities throughout the country that are similar size, doing similar projects. And, I actually have a meeting set up tomorrow with a somewhat similar sized community in Texas that's doing something. And some of their command staff and brass are going to kind of brief me and the police chief on what they've been doing. So I expect that to be a valuable meeting. If anybody on a subcommittee level, without having a quorum wants to jump on tomorrow at 3:30, feel free to shoot me an email and I will send you the Zoom information. I look forward to that meeting. And I'd like to thank the city manager of FAR Texas for providing me, just being amazing, and their chief of police as well. Our current IT contract is kind of on a month-to-month basis. We're out of contract on that. I've spoken with the internal stakeholders on that deal with the vendors now at the moment, and we're going to begin the RFP process to get that into a regular contract, and we're going to effectuate that purchasing process soon, and we're going to open it up and see what's out there as opposed to in addition to what we have, and see what other vendors might have and what they might have to offer. So you could expect to see an RFP on that shortly. Whether we do it as a professional service contract or competitive contract, and I'm still kind of working through. Both are workable and legal, so I'm just trying to decide which one might be in our best interest. On an agenda item, you see an item called talking about the storage of documents, and that is a company called PolicyStat/iContracts. They're one and the same. And what that's going to do is it's going to digitize our personnel manual for the borough. It's going to, the township. It's going to digitize I knew that would happen eventually. It's going to digitize all of our personnel manuals between the township policies, the swimming pool policies, the rec policies, the union contracts. And going forward, whether it's a new employee or current employees that want to be shown an update to the policy, they're all going to have to log on, register, create an account. And if we have a new policy that comes out, we're going to know they read it because they're going to have to log in and sign off on that they read it. So it's a really good way it's a really good thing that the private sector is doing a lot of, that we're not seeing so much in the public sector, but I had the opportunity to meet the vendor and see their presentation. And I think it's going to be of great value, especially to a large township like ours. I had a meeting with Tracy and Mr. DeLuca regarding the NJ ZIP program. It's a grant program for electric vehicles of a certain weight and ton. That application period opened today. I'm just waiting on Tracy to get back to us with some of the specs required that have been approved in the past. And if it's a vehicle of sorts that we can use, we'll happily put a grant in to try to be, obviously more sustainable using electric vehicles. There is a resolution just lastly on the renewal of the JIF. We're obviously staying in the same joint insurance fund. It's retro back to January 1st. In doing some initial research, we discovered that resolution, part of the resolution was passed earlier in the year, but the second half of that resolution wasn't passed. So we are passing that retroactive to January 1st. That is all I have. I have some comments on some of the discussion items that I'll reserve until that time.
Thank you, Mr. Gimes. Any questions for Mr. Gimes at this time?
Mr. Gimes doesn't know that we have a drinking game. Every time you say borough, we take a sip.
Sip my
so easy to do.
Yeah. So keep talking.
Wait, I gotta get a glass.
Thank you, Mr. Gimes. We'll now hear from our township attorney, Mr. Desiderio.
Mayor, I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. Do we have any questions for Mr. Desiderio at this time? Hearing none.
We're going to need Mr. Desiderio for some of the discussion items, so he'll need to stick around, but nothing for now.
I was not planning on leaving, Mr. Limbrick.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. I will now hear from our Township Clerk, Ms. Fritzen.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few things I wanted to report. First, that yesterday was a filing deadline for petitions for Township Committee vacancies, Democratic, Republican, and also some county committee. And the petition filing deadline was 4 p.m. yesterday. So my office closed of all staff at 4 p.m. For Democratic Township Committee, we had the filing of Nancy J. Adams and Jermaine L. Kripe. Republican, no petitions were filed, and Republican County Committee, the districts were filed. The laws change. There's no longer male and female. It's persons. So that was a first. And these people will be running in the upcoming June 8th primary. The other thing is we're seeing event applications, filming applications and permits being issued, block parties, garage sales, all of course within the realms of health and social distancing and mask wearing. But again, there is beginning to be quite a bit of activity in those things as the numbers have gone up for outside events in particular. So that's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Any questions for Ms. Fritzen?
Just one. Ms. Fritzen, will you have the list, or will the county have the list of those from both parties who registered to run for the district leader positions?
I have those, Mr. Limbrick. I'm going to get them to everybody that would like to have it tomorrow. I've already turned it into the county today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Limbrick. And thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Any more questions for Ms. Fritzen? All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 16, reports from elected officials. We'll start off from hearing from our Deputy Mayor, Mr. Daffis.
Thanks, Mayor. Public health, I was going to focus on that. We already covered it during the Board of Health meeting, and Administrator Gimes already covered two other topics I was going to go into, and we'll be discussing more a little bit later, namely finance, making some decisions with respect to adopting our budget, and the Community Board on Police. We'll be talking about amendments to the charter, but as Mr. Gimes noted, we did have a meeting to discuss the crisis intervention team implementation and what that would look like. And Jerry, if you haven't already, I would reach out to the city of Eugene in Oregon. They started the CAHOOTS model, CAHOOTS, which means Crisis Assistance Help Out on the Streets. It is the national model that other towns and cities across the nation have followed, and it is the one that we were looking to emulate as well. So, and I'm aware of what they're doing in Texas. Surprisingly, Texas is very progressive in things like this. I was just in a meeting with some of their representatives to talk about eviction and foreclosure diversion. They're doing some amazing groundbreaking stuff there that is not being done anywhere else in the country right now. So you will hear more from me during our discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. We'll now hear from Ms. Adams.
I didn't know what my spot was tonight since I had to miss the introduction. I was like, oh no. So thank you, Mayor. If I can see, I just wanted to report from Memorial Park Conservancy. information. They are doing the painters in the park. They have people lined up for that already. That's May 15th with a rain date of the 16th from 10 a.m. People will meet or register if they're going to go somewhere in the park to literally paint, which is really cool. And they're getting a lot of interest from local artists. So that'll be a fun event. And that's Flagpole Hill is up at the top by Donnell. And that's where they'll be meeting and then going to different locations around the park. So check that out. That's May 15th, sorry, with the rain date of the 16th. The annual meeting for Memorial Park Conservancy was March 25th, and the link to that video is on the Maplewood website, so you can check it out under news and announcements. Also, I can't read my own writing. Let's see. Oh, they are planning on moving forward. They got Historic Preservation Commission approved their application to the State Historic Preservation Commission for improvements to the entrance to the park. Again, right across from the train station that we've looked at on our Engineering and Public Works Committee. That is going to do a nice, just give an entrance to the park and that triangle that's right when you walk across from the train station and enter. So there's not really any really great entrance to Memorial Park, and it's deserving of at least one. So they're improving that. That's a project they hope to work on this spring or summer. And then also we have a local Maplewood resident who doesn't know I'm calling her out, but Laura Denton is her name. And she's, I was on a call with the head of AGZA, which is the American Green Zone Alliance, which who I got to know through all the leaf blower things a few years ago, and also the head of Quiet Communities. And they both work together. One's in Massachusetts, the other is in California, but there's an AGZA certified all electric professional landscaping company being opened by a Maplewood resident named Laura Denton, which is awesome. And hopefully she's already got a waiting list apparently. And this is really a marketing opportunity for commercial landscapers all over to offer green services, because members of the community are really wanting it, and they can't find it. And they don't feel like they can necessarily tell the landscapers what equipment to use. So this is a really, I'm sure she's going to be successful, and hopefully she'll expand to be able to do municipal services like parks, so that maybe when we do our RFP next year, we can maybe consider including that, that we want whoever we hire to use green, environmental, I should say, because green and grass and all that, but environmental practices with regard to maintaining our own properties. Just want to, Women's History Month, I want to give a shout out, please, to our Department of Cultural Affairs, specifically Missy Mancuso, Anna, and Lisa for all the work they did, along with the rest of us on the committee to organize all those events. And just another thank you to all those former and current elected women who participated in what I think was our best proclamation for Women's History Month yet. We had 22 women, former and current officials, who participated, and that was great. From Rec and Human Services, a lot of this will be on for discussion, and our Candace already mentioned the Broadway River cleanup on April 24th. The summer meals program will be happening and moving it over by the gazebo on Springfield Avenue by the Hilton Branch. So the rest of it is all stuff that we'll be talking about with regard to venue fees and discussion items. And I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Awesome. We'll now hear from Mr. DeLuca.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to give an update on our affordable housing work. As you know, we have two main buckets. Our rental set aside is 15% of any units going up of 5 or more units. They have to do 15% affordable. Anything 4 or less units, they have to pay a fee into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then we have our affordable home ownership program. And this is where we help families buy homes, and it's modest. We're talking about 2 homes here in town. And just to put this in perspective, New Jersey Futures issued a report last September that said in New Jersey, 77% of white households are homeowners. And for Black households, it's 41%. So there's a huge gap between the white households homeowners and Black household homeowners. So one of our programs that we all agreed to was to move forward on 2 homes. I'm going to show you a home that we're closing on tomorrow that we bought. Let me share that. Here we go. This home is a 3-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage. And as I said, we're closing on this tomorrow. We will be renovating this. It just needs minor renovation. So this will be done. We're working with Housing and Neighborhood Development in Orange. And then we're going to be selling this house to an eligible family. And I'll show you here is the affirmative marketing that we're using. Let me just move this up. So we'll be taking these ads out. So the way this will work is people will apply through May 26th to purchase this house. This house will be sold to the ultimate family for $206,562. And it'll be deed restricted for 30 years. So because it's deed restricted, the taxes will be based on this amount as opposed to the market rate. So it brings down the monthly cost of keeping the family there. So it's very important the way this is structured. So again, $206,000 for sale. It'll be sold to a moderate income family. So here are the guidelines. So a family of 3 is about $76,000 in annual income. A family of 4, $84,400. So again, we will be working with Community Grants and Housing to collect eligible homeowners. There'll be a list, there'll be a random drawing. The way it works with the state is anyone in Essex, Morris, Union, or Warren counties are selected before any other people in any other counties. So all this is moving forward. Hopefully we'll have a family in there, in that home by the summer. And maybe I'm a little optimistic, Mr. Desiderio, but I think we can probably pull this off, maybe by the late summer.
Yeah, I don't see any reason not, Mayor. Well, like you said, we're going to close tomorrow. Everything seems to be working. All our support people, Community Grants Planning and Housing, and Enhance. I think I think there's going to be a great demand, so I think we'll get it done.
Good. So the other thing I just wanted to mention, we're not ready for prime time yet, but we have had discussions with iron ore developers. They have a responsibility to produce a home. They were faced with the same problem we had, finding a home. So what we found in the alternative is a lot. And what we're talking about is doing a partnership where we will be building an attached building with 2 separate units. And each of these units will be sold, sort of a duplex. And so each will have 3 bedrooms. Each will be sold as a separate affordable home. We're still in negotiations. Hopefully sometime either at the next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll bring a proposal back about this partnership. So that will actually create 3 for-sale homes to meet for affordable housing income families.
And Mayor, just an add on that one with regard to the iron ore, that one is actually a low income, is that right?
That's correct. So they will actually sell that for a lower amount. Okay, I'm going to move on unless anyone has any questions about this. Okay, I've been working on that police off-duty ordinance. I'll be sending it to all you, and I'll be ready to have our conversation at the April 14th Public Safety Committee meeting. I want to give you an update about the Apothecarium with Terrace End, New Jersey. The target opening is May 7th. So mark down it's not going to be April 20th, 4/20 It's going to come and go. But take May 7th. That's the next target. We'll see what happens. We are having some meetings with the police in reference to security of the building and the grounds, and also operations. We're going to have the Diana, who's the community outreach specialist. She's going to go to the police headquarters and do briefings and trainings with the police officers and our superior officers as to what's going on there, so that everyone's aware of what's happening. We are going to address the fence issue, so that'll be taken care of. I'll be meeting with the general manager there next week. So things are moving forward. I don't know if you've seen the building, but the outside is starting to look really nice.
I was there this afternoon because I went to visit the Yale Corner for the COVID testing, and the white looks beautiful. It blends in really nice. It's almost seamless. You don't realize. I mean, it's such an upgrade from the previous.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
And I don't know if you noticed in your mail, but Milburn is introducing an ordinance to prohibit cannabis buildings in their geographic territory. So
Opting out. They're opting out.
they are opting out.
So did like Chatham, Madison, Summit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any potheads in Milburn, but if there are, they'd be able to come to Maplewood.
Well, I don't know if they think that, you know, some stoner in a van's going to pull up on a corner somewhere if they don't opt out and start selling pot, but that's the exact opposite.
Just remember that all we're doing right now is medical, and then we're going to be talking about as we see what develops at the state level. I know Mr. Daffis went to a webinar on this. We'll learn more about what the state is going to allow us to do as far as recreation. We'll negotiate with TerraSend to make sure our needs and their needs work together.
Right. I mean, I think end of the day, establishing the process from medical perspective is the baseline, and doing that effectively makes it more seamless to transition into both, right?
Right.
And then from a geographical perspective, Milburn's loss and all those other municipalities is our gain. We increase our market share, which drives our revenue and provides
Absolutely.
So all are welcome here in Maplewood.
Especially if we get 2%.
Next up, I just want to remind anyone watching that, let me just see if I can share this. The Soma Arts, we have a town hall Zoom meeting, and this is going to be on April 12th. This is next Monday. So please come by from 7:30 to 8. There's the information on the Zoom. And we'll be talking with the artistic community about how we can help them move forward and get back in the swing of things with the pandemic. And lastly, I just want to talk about the Springfield Avenue Partnership. Two things. One is we did submit the Main Street application last week. I want to thank Ms. Adams. She helped with this. Susan Newberry, our historian, helped a lot with this. You know, some of the old pictures. I happen to have a picture up here behind me. This is the old trolley car that went down Springfield Avenue. So we found a lot of old pictures of old buildings. It's really, there's quite a bit of reuse of buildings up there, which we didn't appreciate as much as we do now. So that's going to be helpful. So we'll see what happens. We did make the application, and Nicole Wallace at the partnership did a really good job on this. And the second part of this with the partnership, we got a request from the board of the partnership asking us to enter into discussions with the owner of Yale Corner about the possibility of extending the term of the lease. Right now, the lease is primarily a month to month. It's sort of open-ended, but it can end at any time. So we wanted to get the sense of the township committee as if we could begin these discussions with the owner to see if there's a longer term lease that we can enter into, which would give us some flexibility and some planning, some fundraising, and what have you. So I just want to see if everyone's okay with that.
I'm all for that. Yeah.
Okay, I see head shakes, so good. Okay.
Oh, we need it.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. We'll now move on to hear from Mr. Limbrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of items on the discussion agenda tonight, so I don't want to take up too much time. I'll just mention that the Community Board on Police will be having its monthly meeting tomorrow night at 7:30, and that's on Zoom as usual. And a week from tomorrow night, April 14th, as Mr. DeLuca already mentioned, will be our monthly Public Safety Committee meeting, and that will also be via Zoom. So the public is invited to attend both of those meetings, and we hope to see some folks there. I will let that serve as my report, since you'll be hearing plenty from me during the upcoming discussion items. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Linden. Okay, I will be brief because we do have 8 discussion items and some will be quite lengthy. First, I want to do a couple recognitions. First, I want to recognize the Achieve Foundation for an outstanding 100 nights with Hank Zona. It was a wonderful event. They raised a lot of money for a very worthy cause. So a couple of Fridays ago, I had the opportunity to be in a quiz contest with President Collum. We tied, so we still can, so we did not lose. We did tie, but great cause, raised a lot of money. I also want to recognize the Library Foundation for a wonderful event they had a couple of Mondays ago with former New Orleans Mayor and Urban League President Mark Morial. It was very informative. I enjoyed it very much, giving us some guidance in terms of how we can move forward with inclusivity and engagement. I also want to recognize, the efforts of our Asian American and Pacific Islander community for putting on a phenomenal event last Friday evening. Really is a remembrance of those who tragically lost their lives in Atlanta, and just for addressing a lot of the anti-Asian, hate that we have out here in the community. We pledged to continue the fight, and we will do that. And some of our township employees are now working on Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which starts in May. And in that vein, I just want to recognize that we are moving forward. We had to cancel last night, but on this Thursday at 6, we'll be doing our first steering committee meeting for Juneteenth. We do plan to move forward with a celebration in that regard. So that's this Thursday. And then finally, a topic that continues to be a hot topic. I want to recognize literally the hundreds, over 100 emails I've received regarding the current situation of our schools. And since our last meeting, I visited another school, Seth Boyden, did a walkthrough. Myself, along with President Collin, we continue to work in collaboration with Rocio Lopez, as well as with Dr. Taylor and his team to continue to push forward to bring our children back into our schools and our classrooms. Since we last spoke, it's now public knowledge that we have worked with the county and have provided vaccination opportunities, thousands of opportunities for teachers who want to get vaccinated. We have test kits available. And now we're focusing on the facilities with the univents and trying to find a way to expedite the process of getting new univents in the schools or getting the ones that are damaged repaired. We are cognizant of a desire to push from the 6 feet to 3 feet, and we'll have conversations in regards to that from social distancing. So your voice is being heard and the work continues. So thank you very much. That will be my report for this evening. We'll now move on to our discussion items, and we'll hear from Mr. Lindbergh regarding pool fees. Mr. Lindbergh, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, the pool committee has been meeting, and it is certainly our plan and our hope that we will be able to have a full pool season for 2021. Obviously, that will be dependent on the guidance that we get from the state, from the county, from our municipal health officer in terms of COVID guidance. We are planning that, on at least the likelihood, if not the certainty, that there may need to be capacity limits and potential social distancing guidelines that we'll have to put in place, similar to last summer. You may recall we had to institute a system where people needed to register, we had time slots, and people could either call or go online and register for time slots. And we had several different time slots during the day, and then we would a time slot would end and we would have a period of, at first it was close to half an hour, and then we were able to get more efficient with our staff. And I think we were able to get it down to like 15 or 20 minutes between time slots. We would do a cleaning of all surfaces, get everyone out, and then we would, we could bring the next group could start coming in. And that was, made it possible for us to both achieve contact tracing and also social distancing and limit the number of people in the facility. So we're expecting that may be the case this year, and we're prepared to do that. Last year we had to develop that on the fly. This year we have experience with that, so we'd be able to implement that much better. We're going to have a better facility this year. We've, as many on this committee know, we have been operating for the past several years with a filtration system at the pool that was pretty substantially past its useful life. And we have been, we've had Anthony over at the pool almost literally knocking on wood and hammering on pipes to get things to keep working. And we have fortunately, made it through without any major incidents and not having to close the pool. But, we made the investment as a committee to replace that filtration system, and that work is ongoing. And, certainly we're hopeful that that will be completed on time for us to open for Memorial Day weekend. And, and have a great new filtration system in place. But in order to start signing people up for the pool and get members registered, we need to set the fees. So the pool committee has sort of come up with two different proposals. There's, we're sort of skipping 2020 because 2020 we ended up not opening the pool until after July 4th weekend. So we ended up going with a prorated membership fee. This year we're obviously hoping to have a full pool season. So the last time we looked at the pool fees and raised the pool fees was actually back in 2018, and we kept those fees for 2019 and again for 2020, and then revised those fees down. Like I said, prorated those for 2020 due to COVID. Obviously this year we're doing this a little later than usual. Again, due to the ongoing pandemic and the uncertainty, the lack of guidance that we know will be coming at some point, but we don't have yet. In the past, we've had an early bird rate, and then we've had a regular rate. So what the two proposals the pool committee came up with has been to go with, basically the 2019 rate, and either to go with, to offer everyone the early bird rate from 2018, 2019, or the regular rate. Those, in terms of what you received in your packet, those are, A is the early bird and B is the regular. And just, the rates of early bird versus regular, or A versus B, for individuals is $280 versus $295, seniors $170 versus $190, couple $405 versus $425, a smaller family is $470 or $495, and family 2 or family plus caregiver is $555 or $585. So you're talking about, a difference in those two proposals of, between $15 and $30 in the rates between the two proposals. In this proposal, these proposals are consistent with the pool committee is doing, which is trying to keep the pool self-liquidating. you know, which is always a challenge, you know, as we've seen over the past decade plus. Membership has, you know, despite our best efforts, you know, pretty consistently declined. So we've been able to make up some of that revenue through swim lessons, which obviously we couldn't do last year and may not be able to do this year. Guest passes, which we weren't able to do last year, are hoping to be able to do in some form this year. Though we're, as we heard from Mr. Kaloje earlier in this meeting, you know, able to retire some debt that the pool took on, where we are taking on fresh debt, you know, a significant amount of fresh debt with the new filtration system. So, so the pool is going to continue to have, my understanding, a significant amount of debt service going forward for the new filtration system and related facilities. So it was the pool committee's recommendation, that while both of these rates would be appropriate, that we actually go with the regular rate from 2019. So option B, but Ms. Mancuso and the pool committee wanted to present the township committee with both options, A and B. So I think I've sort of teed up the discussion. I'd be happy to weigh in further or answer questions, but I think I've spoken on this enough, Mr. Mayor. I'll let you open it up for comments or questions from others.
Thank you, Mr. Lindbergh. Floor is open for a conversation regarding the options. Mr. Daffels.
Thanks, Mayor. Township Administrator Jimes, I know you've had fulsome discussions about this with Community Services Director Mancuso, and obviously you recall you, myself, and the Mayor and Finance Committee along with CFO Kaloje discussed the pool at length as well. What recommendations did you receive from Ms. Mancuso in light of best case scenario in terms of when we can actually expect to start our pool season this year?
Based on the discussions with her, our hope is for the Father's Day weekend. And we based our bid off that. We have a lifeguard bid going out at the moment. So we did it as an option. We did Father's Day as the base and Memorial Day as the option in the event that the construction was ready. She didn't seem too comfortable based on what's going on externally outside of our control as it relates to the contracting, that it could be open for Memorial Day. So, you know, we're planning for the later and hoping for the best as it relates to opening.
And was there a recommendation with respect to either of these proposals, A or B?
Yes, in my discussions with her, given what I just said about the later opening, she thought it would be best to propose the early bird rates for the season, as opposed to the full rates if we're not going to be open for, if it's going to delay 2 or 3 weeks. It doesn't come out to an exact pro rata per day, but it's close. So that was.
Yeah, I mean, something to keep in mind is that for those first few weeks, from Memorial Day to Father's Day weekend, the pool would only be open on weekend days anyway. It's not until after Father's Day weekend that we start with 7-day-a-week operations. So we wouldn't be talking about really 3 weeks. We'd be talking about 3 weekends. And for what it's worth, my understanding, and I don't know the contract as well as maybe some others on this call, but I think there would be contractually, we'd be entitled to some damages or some money back from the contractor if they're running behind that significantly in terms of the job.
There is a liquidated in there. I know the engineers discussed that with them. Let them know that that's going to be a possibility.
Right. So I don't know that it would be a one-to-one correlation, but I think that would give us the opportunity to recover, to the extent we go, we charge our residents less, that would give the pool, the opportunity to, the township, the opportunity to recover, some of that foregone revenue, because we have to open later, we keep the price down for residents, but we recover that money, from the contractor. Is that a fair way of thinking of it, Mr. Johns?
Yes, but I think also liquidated damages.
I respectfully to both of you, I don't think that should be part of your analysis. First off, the issue of liquidated damages is never an easy issue. There may be other causes and effects with regard to this filter, and it may take a very long time, possibly years, before you collect liquidated damages. So I respectfully don't suggest that you put that in your analysis. I mean, if they're available, we'll go after them. I'm not suggesting we won't, but I don't think you're going to get a check in 3 weeks before liquidated damages.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the right to withhold money from their final bid based on that. It would be argued and possibly litigated depending on how much it was. So I agree with that.
So Mayor, I'm going to support option A, the early bird proposal for this season. I think there's a lot more to this discussion, and we're going to get into some of it a little bit later in our discussion tonight about demographics and access and equity and all that good stuff. I do understand that our community services director has to get some rates from us tonight to start working in terms of opening up the whole membership process. So, as between option A and B, based on what I've heard and what I knew coming into the meeting tonight, I'm going to support option A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Would anyone else like to comment on the two options here?
Vic has his little hand up in the corner.
So thank you. I support option A. And I know it's dangerous to spend money before we know we have it, but we are due to hopefully to get some money from the feds. And I think the pool is probably a possibility of how, if we're able to do that, is put some of that money into the pool, because we really suffered last year because of what happened. And so I would like to keep the rates as low as possible. And so that's why I would go with option A.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Ms. Adams.
Option A, I totally see it, especially as a sort of prorated measure. That's kind of how I would look at it. So I would go with A.
Okay. So Mr. Limbrick, option A is what the TC is in favor of. So that's how we'll move forward, sir.
Okay. I mean, I think we need a resolution on that, right, Mr. Desiderio? So I think it's resolution 103-21, and it's on the consent agenda, Mr. Desiderio. Is that right?
It is, but because we circulated 2 copies, I'd like to pull it off of that. I'd like to do the resolution right now. Okay, so this would be, if that's okay, Mayor?
That's fine, Mr. Desiderio. I'll entertain that motion.
This would be resolution 103-21. And just so there's not any confusion, I'm going to read the rates that are up for your consideration on passage. So the individual, this is for the pool fees for 2021, individual $280, senior 65 and older $170, couple $405, family 1 $470, family 2 and caregiver $555.
I'd like to move that, Mr. Mayor.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Limbrick?
Yes.
Mayor McGehee?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Okay, we'll now move on to discussion item number 2. Mr. Limbrick, you'll keep the floor here. Lighting and park hours, excuse me.
Yes, and and this like my items, item 6 later is under my name, but could just as easily be under any number of other people. This is an item that we've discussed here before. We've discussed in other committees before outside of this committee. And was discussed at the last Township Committee meeting, was discussed at the last Recreation and Human Services Committee meeting. Our main objectives here are really twofold, and that is to eliminate any legal obstacle to lighting the skate park at Maple Crest. We've had some overtures from groups in the community, particularly the Danny Ives Foundation, about potentially making a contribution towards providing lighting for the skate park at Maple Crest, and obviously interest from people in the community and seeing that project. Whether we'd be able to do that in the short term or whether that's a more long-term project, I don't know. But currently our ordinance would not allow that because it states that Maple Crest Park closes at sunset, and there's no exception made for the skate park. So what was discussed at Recreation and Human Services, and it may have even been discussed at our last Township Committee meeting, but that was 3 weeks ago, so who can remember, is just taking, the ordinance currently says, and I think I sent around the language, or at least the code language to many of you earlier this evening, currently says that the park closes at sunset, and just changing that language to be consistent with Memorial and DeHart parks, which say 10:30. I'm just opening that. It's the hours for use of the fields and courts, would still be from 8 a.m. to sunset, and that would potentially allow us, because I don't think that the skate park would be considered a field or court, but maybe we can discuss that. But at least that would remove the sort of legal prohibition currently in the code of lighting the skate park. The other goal of this discussion and this potential amendment to the ordinance would be to address the issue of the lighted tennis courts and basketball court at Memorial Park, which are regularly lit in the evenings until the park is closed on a regular basis, regardless of whether anyone has taken a permit or where there's any recreation department sponsored or sanctioned activities going on those courts. So what the Recreation Advisory Committee brought to our attention looking at that code was that the code did not accurately reflect the reality of what was going on at that park. So the proposal would be to change the portion of the code that says the hours for the tennis courts and basketball courts shall be from 8 a.m. to sunset Monday through Saturday and from 10 a.m. to sunset on Sunday, to change sunset to close, and then to take out the portions that say that tennis court users may apply for a permit to use the tennis courts after sunset under artificial lighting conditions, and artificial lightings for the basketball courts will occur only during recreation department sponsored or sanctioned activities, to basically conform with the reality that the lights are on those courts after dark until the park closes. Like I said, regardless of whether permits have been issued or there's sponsored or sanctioned recreation department activities. So that was, and Ms. Adams can chime in since she was not only at, but chairing the meeting where this was discussed, Recreation and Human Services. if anything is inconsistent with her recollection of what was discussed. And obviously, this is a decision that has to be made by the governing body. So I think I have, again, done what I can do to tee this up. So I will turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor, and for any questions or comments by my colleagues.
Yeah, I'll just.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Sure. I was just gonna pipe in a little. Just the process that we went through at Rec and Human Services was to go along with the relevant department heads to go park by park with what the reality is, with the activity in those parks and their proximity to neighborhoods, and whether or not it made sense to extend hours. The one that was the biggest change, I think, was Maple Crest, because that closes at sunset. And now we're basically marrying it with Memorial Park and the consistency there. And the lights at the courts for both tennis and basketball and Memorial Park are on timers. They're both on until, I believe, 9:30 or 10, not sure, but that's under our director's control and purview until such time that if that becomes problematic, then we'll address it then. But so far it hasn't been recently. So basically the biggest change here is just to have Maple Crest Park be the same hours of being open as Memorial Park. The other parks, the little neighborhood parks around, it's based on activity, what kind of activities are programmed and done there, and also, as I said before, the proximity to neighborhoods. So I think Mr. Lembrick outlined it in the document he sent to us accurately. And we also had a lot of discussion. We had the engineer at our Rec and Human Services meeting to discuss lighting, and the chief of police, who had also weighed in at public safety before, saying he was fine with the skate park. There is some discussion, and that'll be for future meetings, with regard to whether or not that's a realistic thing that can be done, because the Danny Ives Foundation, we believe, is greatly underestimating what it'll cost to properly light that for safety and of using it. If we're going to light it, it has to be bright enough so that the users aren't in danger of having insufficient lighting. So that means money. So, and that might be something, going forward we do with OSTF, or we do, whatever, but it's not for discussion here. This is just setting the parameters of the hours of the parks being open for the most part. So.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. DeLuca, or would you like to speak on this subject?
Yes. I'm a little unclear because are we doing the Maple Crest to be DeHart or Memorial? Because it's different. DeHart, the hours for fields and courts is 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And Memorial, the hours for fields is 8 to sunset. Courts is 8 to sunset. So
wherever we were doing it with Maplewood Memorial and Maple Crest being the same hours to close the park at 10:30. Okay. Yeah, the use of the courts is sunset if they're not lit, and if they're lit, they're on a timer. That was the discussion we had with Missy.
Okay, well, DeHart doesn't say that. It just says the hours for the use of fields and courts shall be 8 a.m. to 10.
Because some of the fields at DeHart are lit, but not the courts.
Right, but you could play ball till 9 o'clock sometimes in the summer.
Well, there's some creative lighting by headlights.
Yeah,
as well.
I think we just got to be clear which way. I would agree to keep it to Memorial Park, to have the fields closed at sunset. The other sort of global issue with our parks is, like, even in Orchard and Borden Park, where we close at sunset, we have people that walk their dogs in the park after sunset. And essentially they violate our ordinance. And this has always been a stickler of how you say, okay, you can walk your dog during a closed, in a closed park, but you can't sit on a bench during a closed park. And I think, that's something, in addition to what you're looking at, this is something to look at too, because why are we making our, people who are walking dogs at 8 o'clock at night in November violating the ordinance?
Yeah.
It's one of those things, I think that, just logically, it's not, nobody's enforcing that. So if we want to make the ordinance fit with reality with regard to passive use of the park, or whether or not, and maybe Mr. Desiderio can weigh in, whether or not the park being open or closed has anything to do with passively walking through a park, or if it's just like, we're not putting gates around the park, people can go in them, but is that count as them being used if people are traversing them on a sidewalk?
The answer is I would say yes. I mean, I think the issue is we're closing the parks or not. I think enforcement, you want to be as objective as possible. So if you want to carve out an exception, I mean, I believe, Mr. DeLuca, if I'm not wrong, when we actually had commuters going back and forth, that people would get off the train late in the evening and go through Memorial Park. So that would be another use. I mean, I think we put call boxes in the parks for protection. So, I mean, maybe this is something that should be looked at more closely and come up with a carve out. I don't know, but it technically would be
and that's why we made 10:30 in Memorial Park, because of the commuters.
Right. So if we want to extend it, I mean, is there a reason we don't allow, is there a reason we even have closed hours? And maybe we just put when the lighting will be on, where there's lighting on whether it's a softball field in DeHart or basketball or tennis courts in other parks. Maybe we just set the hours of lighting. Why do we have hours of open parks anyway?
So let's just, all right, so I'm clear. Are we now saying we want to line fields and courts with the same time the parks are open?
No, we're just talking about whether or not, what hours to set for a park being open or closed. And do we need, I guess, I'm just asking the basic question, do we even need to have open and closed parks? And maybe that goes back to public safety for that broader question, because I would expect that it's a public safety issue, just like cars can't be parked on our streets overnight. Or we just let people walk through as long as they're on their sidewalks. And I don't know, everybody's just kind of staring at me.
I think if I'm coming off the train, it's a pre-COVID, I'm coming off the train, I went to the Knicks game or whatever game, and I would need to walk through the park, and you're telling me the park's closed, I gotta walk around and increase my commute home, I'm gonna be BS.
Right.
It's not gonna work for me.
Right.
So
I used to have the same thing. I used to park by the library, go to a Mets game, come back at midnight, walk through the park.
Yep.
Yeah, and nobody stopped you.
But we don't know that. I mean, the whole issue of creating situations where some people might be getting this enforced versus others.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's why I asked the broader question. And I think maybe it's maybe we all need to think on it and should go back to public safety as to whether or not we need hours.
Why don't you guys keep it in your committee and have the chief come and then come back with a proposal that deals with all this?
All right.
Yeah, Mr. Daffis?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the passive use point is a really interesting one, and we should be consistent so that if we're okay with someone walking through Memorial Park at night, really late at night, we should also be okay with someone doing the same in Orchard Park and not be like, well, over there might be something else going on. So we should definitely be consistent with whatever we do. And I think you guys have done such a great job, Ms. Adams, Mr. Lembrick, taking this far with respect to lighting. Take it all the way if you can.
And maybe Mr. Desiderio could join you too.
I was already going to say that since he brought up that exception. You got another meeting, Raj.
No problem. Just let me know when.
Yeah, and and I think that I unless the Danny Ives Foundation is is hot to trot with the money for the lighting, I don't think that there's a lot of time sensitivity on this.
Right.
I think we can go ahead and we can just sort of make an omnibus change to this once we've got it all ready, as opposed to having to do this piecemeal.
Correct. We're good for now.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
All right, so takeaways, you will kick this back to committee. You'll have the chief involved as well as Mr. Desiderio, and then report back, if not this meeting, the first meeting in May.
Yeah, I think probably more likely the first meeting in May, right, Nancy? Ms. Adams? Okay.
Yes, Greg, Mr. Lundberg.
Great, awesome. All right, great. Thank you both. Let's move on to discussion item number 3, venue rates. Ms. Adams.
Sorry, trying to unmute and control Windows as well. So this was discussed at, let me pull up the right document. I have too many. Rec and Human. You all got the rates that were proposed. And before we go into that, there were a couple of discussion items that this committee needs to talk about. One, and Mr. Gimes, I'm going to ask you to chime in as well. One of those is regarding profits versus nonprofits and the policy decision that Township Committee needs to talk about. Because as you see in the rates that Anna sent us, you know, there are differentials there, and she did a really great job of trying to streamline the rates. We also have the Arts Committee and arts groups as a separate one to try to make things affordable for people. But one of our bigger discussions at Rec and Human, and Mr. Lundberg and Mr. Gimes can help me talk with you guys about this, is township sponsored events. So we've sponsored or co-sponsored some events, and what a trend that started happening was that Ms. Mancuso was being asked to co-sponsor events by different groups, various groups. Once they hear that Township is co-sponsoring an event, then other groups try to get that too. And part of it is for insurance purposes for those groups. Part of it is to cut other expenses, and so on and so forth. And the discussion we had at Rec and Human Services was with regard to, we need a clearer policy on that so that our department head or her staff doesn't get confronted by people wanting to use a facility like the Woodland and then say, well, this is the township sponsored event, or the township's co-sponsoring us, so all of this stuff should be for free, or this should be a much lower rate. And it puts them in a bad position, and it costs all the taxpayers of Maplewood money when we give breaks to this group or that group. So I guess the discussion I'm asking for the Township Committee to talk about is, do we want to grandfather in past events that we've co-sponsored and then draw a line that we're not going to co-sponsor any other events? Do we want to lay out parameters as to what events are township events or co-sponsored event? I mean, if, you know, sometimes it's very clear, but when there's an independent group or just a group that wants to do a cultural festival, and then we stick our logo on things, and then they save money, but the money has to come from somewhere to run this venue. And so that was kind of the discussion. Mr. Lundberg, Mr. Gimes, do you want to like pipe in here and see if I've covered that correctly as to what our dilemma is and why we need to figure this out?
I think one of the issues I raised in that discussion was the co-sponsoring of events. Obviously, the township has a right to sponsor and host events as they choose. And if we're co-sponsoring an event, you know, that's okay too. But I think my challenges and the distinction would be, you know, if we're co-sponsoring an event and we're a truly active participant in the planning and organization of that event, I see no issue with the co-sponsoring, and then our insurance would cover us. If somebody's coming to us asking us just to quote co-sponsor for the purpose of slapping our name on it so they can use our insurance, and we have no active participation in the event, I have a little bit of a concern with that because we're not really involved in it. And I don't know how much that happened. So that was just, I know that's happened a few times from what I understand, but that was the distinction that I drew as far as to whether or not we should co-sponsor and provide our insurance. Are we actively participating in this event, or are we just doing it to give them cover because they don't have or don't want to expend the money for insurance? The issue with the rates versus nonprofits and profits has always been a, intense discussion in a couple of the towns I've been in, because, on its surface, a nonprofit rate sounds perfectly acceptable and perfectly okay. But, for a long time, up until a few years ago, the National Football League was a nonprofit. And, some small businesses who are putting on events, or small companies that are not nonprofits, are not flush with cash, whereas a nonprofit might be. So it's just a difficult balance to make. If it's a nonprofit versus a profit, or should you just have one rate? That's ultimately a policy decision, but there's other factors. There's a variety of factors that go into that decision. So, they were the two key issues that I, the insurance one most notably, that I, was a little concerned about as far as what our role in the actual event was. And should we be giving discounts just because we're slapping our name on an event?
Thank you, Mr. Jimes. Mr. Daffers or Mr. DeLuca? Mr. DeLuca, I see you've unmuted.
Yes, thank you. So, the Arts Council has been talking about this, and we looked at the rates, and the Arts Council's fine with the rates. I think, Mr. Jimes, I would say that, it has worked between the private events and the public events, the nonprofit events. I think the sponsorship thing is another question. I would admit that in the past, there's probably been a fairly liberal interpretation as to the sponsorship. I think the most important thing is the sponsorship was created to bring in pretty much artistic and cultural activity that could not survive on its own or met a underserved population. So, for example, we did some work with the Latino community, with the Asian community, that in the very beginning, those festivals couldn't get going. I think there should be an incubation period where we sponsor it for a certain amount of years and then they're on their own. The groups now are much better prepared to sponsor on their own than they were at that early stage. The same thing with the Bergdorf. We brought in a theater group when we had the strollers, but we really had no professional theater group. So we co-sponsor things to bring people in, to bring populations in that just can't come in on their own. And then lastly, there's sometimes a type of performance that just doesn't make it on its own. For example, we brought classical music back. For a long time, we had no classical music. So we started the classical music series because there are people in the community who want that. And so by us co-sponsoring it, we were able to defray the cost a little bit and actually have that as one of the offerings. And I think you could also argue some of the work by some of the artists at 1978. So I think we should leave it up to the Division of Arts and Culture and the Department of Community Services to make a decision in a very narrow lane as to what is the sponsorship for, how does it advance our mission as an arts and cultural group that wants to be very diverse, that wants to encourage activity by a robust group of both performers and audiences. And I think we should just leave it at that and maybe look at it in a year. We have new people in there now. I think some new thinking, and I would hate to see us just throw that out right now, but rather let's, well, certainly we can't operate now because everything's messed up, but maybe at the end of 2022, take another look at this and see how it's gone.
Yeah, Mr. DeLuca, I agree with you 100%. I think that there's a theme here of equality, right? And I think that there are organizations that would not have gotten their stuff off the ground. We want to name them here, but we know who they are, if it wasn't for the way we did sponsor these events. And I think that Anna's done a phenomenal job, coming into this role. And I don't want to clip her wings. Technically, she's the appropriate authority, she and Melissa. And I like to keep it that way in terms of allowing them to kind of assess these events and kind of figure out their way. And, when we do help out with these events, that's what leads to the Maplewood Stocks and the other events when we help out initially. So I like to keep it that way for now, and we can revisit this. I would agree, like next year, 100%.
My biggest issue here is I don't disagree with what either of you are saying, other than when you define a narrow, they don't have the ability to define that narrow lane. And to the extent that we can help them because the people coming to them aren't in our faces. Well, sometimes, but not, they're always in there. And if they don't know the lane is, they don't know if they're out of the lane or there's no parameters.
I think that's not true. I think
that's not what we're being told.
I think there's got to be some spine building here. They have to say no. They have to say no. Look, in the venue thing, isn't there something, I can't find my paper, but isn't there something that says, we're going to work with groups that are underserved? It's not that hard to figure it out. And I think if we want to,
all right, then the narrow lane we tell them as department officials will be then more distinctive like that, as opposed to, because there are other groups, like you said, we'll help sponsor it for the first couple of years. So, but at least the incubation period needs to be defined, right? So that we can get, the Latinx like festival or whatever it is. Okay, you got it for 2 years and now that's it. But they need to at least have that parameter laid out, because there's also those private groups coming in.
I look, anybody who's trying to skirt a cost, like, give us insurance for free and all this kind of stuff, or we want a cheaper rate, we should say no. But let's let the division and the department and Mr. Jimes can be the backstop here. Let them decide, because we're not going to know everything. Look, there's a lot of stories out there. I think you have to look at it holistically. What are we offering for the year? What's missing? What do we want to bring in? That's a strategic planning process. And then you have to use your tools. And I think co-sponsorship is one of the tools to use.
Mr. Daffis?
Yeah, agreed. I think there's a balancing act here, right? As Ms. Adams said, we can tighten up some things, but let's take a look at it in 2022 when we're back up and running. But as Mr. DeLuca said, our motto has always been to help emerging groups find their footing. It's good for the township. It promotes the township outward, as well as promoting inward community groups that need to find their voices and need to stand in line with other groups who are better organizers and better planners and more organized and more established. And I think that's the balancing act. And I think we should leave it up to the discretion of Division of Arts and Culture and Community Services Director. And if there are specific issues, then those need to be outlined, other than, oh, we don't know what to do and we don't know if we should help this group. Like Vic said, grow a spine. What the manual says. The manual says underserved groups. And we have a great team in there. Lisa and Anna and, all those great people know what to do with the Bergdorf and the Woodland and our other facilities accordingly. So I'm cool with that. I'm cool with the venue rates. I think that's what our discussion was. We sort of veered off into sponsorship, which is separate. I'm cool with the venue rates. The only objection I would have is a very small one. It's the $2 surcharge for the podium. I think that seems a little cheap to me. The podium is over there. It's available. I don't know why we need to charge $2 for it, but I won't get into a battle over it either. That's it.
Is that new, or is that just sort of a historical?
It's new. It was never charged before.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really know why that was.
I think that has to do with, it just calls out equipment that, you know, if there's other equipment there that is talked about as well. We also just discussed using, getting to that point that I brought up a few years ago where we actually have dishwasher and, you know, washer dryer and real dishes. So there's an investment that they're going to make in that. And because when that's full throttle running, it's like every weekend, just tons of garbage, single-use garbage going in and out, plastics, everything. So we're going to talk more about that, whether to incentivize using, like adding a little fee for to cover the cost of using and cleaning and dealing with all that stuff, or just working that into, like if somebody's using the Great Hall and they're not having a, you know, dining setup, then it's a different fee maybe. Then there's an additional cost when you need tablecloths and dishes, because that's all costs money. So we're going to do that, but also, you know, Anna was talking about incentivizing people instead by, but I'm not, and it sounded good at the time, but I think we're going to revisit that because I'm not sure I agree. I think we should probably just not allow, if you need dishes, then you rent our dishes, basically. So I hope that's okay with everybody.
Okay. So, all right, so just kind of focusing back in. So we're out, the rates were, for the most part, of course, Mr. Daffis objects to the $2 there. But outside of that, we're pretty good. Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. Limbrick, I think, is this you? You back? Yep, you are next. We're looking at.
Okay, are those rates, is that on the consent agenda for tonight?
Let's check and see.
I don't remember.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think.
So do they need to come back next time, or do we need a motion tonight?
Yeah, can we put them on tonight, Mr. Desiderio? Damn, I keep hitting the wrong button.
Or does that have to be done by, if it has to be done by ordinance, then obviously we can.
You know, I have to take a look at it. I really don't think it can be done tonight.
Let's just
okay.
Okay.
All right. I just, you know.
Right.
All right.
Well, and I don't think there's any huge rush for all, you know, because I think we're okay with waiting another meeting. And so, Mr. Desiderio, just let us know if there's an ordinance that needs to be amended. Okay, cool.
Will do.
Because we have time. It's not like it's being rented out, in, you know, like normal.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yep.
So this is demographic information for recreation programs. We had a few members speak earlier from the Recreation Advisory Committee and the Pool Committee. They mentioned this is information that they've been asking about for some time, and we've sort of been going back and forth on this. We've had some legal questions about what we can do, you know, where there might be some privacy concerns here. We've also had, you know, I guess I'll call them some administrative questions in terms of, you know, just what the staff, the recreation staff feels comfortable doing, or as a practical matter, what they can do. You know, my understanding is that to address that second point, the system that they use, the rec desk system, when people sign up, you know, there is the functionality when people register that they can, you know, we can ask questions in terms of race, in terms of household income and other sort of demographic questions, and people can decline to answer if they choose that. You know, the issue of when people register in person, which they can choose to do for any number of reasons, including that they may not have internet access at home, or that they want to save the administrative transaction fee that gets charged when you register online. That particularly for some of the more expensive programs, or for pool that cost several $100s, you know, that can be a substantial fee. the online convenience fee. So, so I wanted to have this discussion here, both obviously because the Township Committee, we're the policymakers, and this is a policy-making decision for us, but also because we have Mrs. Desiderio here who can advise on any potential legal issues, and Mr. Jimes who can talk about how we can implement this, at the employee level through the Recreation Department. And this would be for, across all of our recreation programs, but particularly for the youth programs and for our community pool. And I think the residents and volunteers who spoke earlier articulated the good reasons why this data is being sought, which is to really find out whether our programs are serving a broad cross section of the community, whether there are maybe segments of our community that we're not reaching, or whether there may be a need, financial or otherwise, to supplement our programming or to make our programming more accessible, so that we can better serve all of our community. So I think that tees up the issue, but I will certainly look for the input from Ms. Desiderio and Mr. Jimes, as well as my colleagues, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lindbergh. So yeah, can we hear from Mr. Jimes and Mr. Desiderio first, just to kind of get their input, and then we can continue the discussion?
From my vantage point, if the governing body decides to support the collecting of this information, we can accomplish that goal in two ways. One, obviously, as the committeeman mentioned, through our Rec Desk software program, which has a mechanism to ask questions that would be optional. And then two, if people were to come in person when they're allowed to eventually, I can understand some who don't feel comfortable asking that question. So we could have a survey available on paper with a pencil if they want to fill it out optionally and put it in a box off to the side. We can certainly do that as well. So there's an option to do that. There's a mechanism to do that, to alleviate any discomfort of having our staff having to ask personal questions. So we can accomplish that if the TC decides to move forward with that initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Jimes. Mr. Desiderio, any comments, any thoughts?
Well, if this is from a policy standpoint, if the TC thinks this is advantageous and you're actually going to get data that's going to be useful, then you'll make that decision. My only question is, or my only thought is, I don't have an answer for you right now, as to the operability of these documents. If all of these documents can be requested, and if there's something that could be in those documents that might be, I don't want to say detrimental, but of concern. But I'll check the Oprah issue, but otherwise it's a decision for the TC, which I think should have been brought to you right from the beginning, quite frankly. This is not something that I don't think the administration can do without your insight and direction.
Thank you, Mr. Desiderio. The floor is open.
Just on the Oprah issue real quick, if I may add, I did look through the 27 or 28 exemptions listed on the GRC website, and I didn't really find anything that would exempt the information.
Yeah. That's my gut reaction. I guess I don't know what we're asking. I think there might be, Mr. Jimes, some exemptions for cell phone numbers. That's a general rule. We're not going to ask for social security numbers, I assume, or other data, but we ought to just make sure that there's nothing that could be produced that could be create a problem.
Yeah, I think any questions will gear towards avoiding any of the exemptions. So if you're asking somebody what sport or what activity they're participating in, and then there are demographic questions, those things alone, without any personally identifiable information, would probably be okay to give out.
Thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Daffis.
So thanks, Mayor. A couple things. I mean, with respect to Oprah and the sensitivity of certain information, people's cell phone numbers, addresses, socials, although we shouldn't do social, for other obvious reasons. All of that stuff shouldn't be a concern because the data here, I think the idea here is to collate the data. So we're getting demographic collations as opposed to people's names and their addresses. And obviously there's also the possibility to redact information.
No, we can't do that. That's the whole point, Mr. Davis. The document, if there's an Oprah request, we have to produce the document.
Right, but I think in terms of collecting the data, that's collated, right? Like we're not just taking the pieces of paper that people have filled out their application forms for a specific rec program or service and then putting it aside in a folder. We have the capability apparently to collate and to excise the demographics of that folder without people's names and addresses and other identifying personal criteria, right?
I believe that's the case in the software. I'm not sure, but I believe it is, and I'll verify that before.
All right, so if we have the capability, I do think it's important to do it. It's very common at this point in the private and public sectors to collect demographic data like this. As a state employee, I can tell you I've had to, I've had to fill out those forms, and it is optional. Certain designations and categories are absolutely 100% optional. We have to give it a go to see how it works, but otherwise I do think we're driving blind in terms of knowing if our services and programs are meeting all of our needs and if they're accessible to everyone in our community. I guess that when we get to the point, if we say yes tonight, I do think that we need to have not necessarily another meeting about it, but make sure we're all on the same page about what we're asking about, because I want to make sure that we're all inclusive. So not just gender, which we already ask about, but also race, household, LGBTQ identification. I think that's really important. And I say this not because I identify as a member of the LGBTQ community, but because the LGBTQ households are largely not represented in any data that's being conducted right now from state to state, and certainly not on the federal level. The data that we have is very sparse and very anecdotal. So to the extent that Maplewood can lead here in that alone, I'd be very, very supportive of that.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis. Would anyone else, Mr. DeLuca?
Thank you. I think, we talk a big game about being a diverse community and being inclusive and all that. And if we don't have the data, how are we going to know we are? And, earlier I mentioned the data about home ownership. Well, how do you think they know that if they don't ask the question? So, and furthermore, we already collect data. We ask 120 members of our boards and committees to fill out a form every year to tell us their race, their ethnic, their gender, their sexual orientation, how long they've been living in Maplewood. So we already asked that stuff. And as far as the Oprah, this is Rec Desk, right? This is we're not the only town that has it. I'm sure other towns use it and gather this information. We can find out from other towns what their experience is with this. So we don't have to reinvent it. We can go ask a town, if you collect this information, how do you deal with Oprah? So I think we should absolutely do this. We should move full steam ahead and get this information.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Ms. Adams.
I don't really have anything to add other than what Mr. Daffis and Mr. DeLuca already said. I have no opposition to it. I'm not even sure it needs to be, I just think we need to look at the legalities. I just filled out a form to attend virtually the National Main Street Conference next week. And they asked as an optional survey for demographic information. So I guess if we need to ask for optional, then I guess that's the software that Mr. Jimes was talking about, that would be disassociated from the identity of the person. But I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I can tell people who I am. But I know some people don't feel that way. But
if we need to use it, if for some reason we have a hard time divorcing that data from the individual, there's other survey companies out there that we can use and link to RecDesk. When they're done, provide a link to a Survey Monkey or something like that. And then when we collect the manual data at the desk, we can import that data as well. So into that. So there's options. I mean, this can be done, and I'll do some research with the community service director, and we'll figure out, we'll see what other people are asking and get the right questions and make sure we come up with something that encapsulates everything we're looking for from a race, demographic, and et cetera.
yeah, so that basically sounds like you have TC support. Just figure out how to do it.
Yeah, we'll get it done.
Yeah, I mean, my view on this is, so long as we're good on the legal side, Ms. Desiderio and Mr. Jimes and Ms. Mancuso and her team can get it done on the practical side. On a policy side, I agree, for all the reasons that were given by Mrs. Lofsky and the others before, and by Mr. DeLuca just now. I think from a policy making side, we should absolutely do this. So I don't know that there needs to be a vote of any kind, but I think we can just maybe just give direction to Mr. Jimes to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lindbergh. I think we're good here. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, living in a world where it's all about data and segmentation, what I do for a living, where all we do is carve segments and cohorts, and that's how we get smarter and make more money and more efficient and save cost. Why we would not be doing this a long time ago, I'm baffled. So let's just move forward and get this done. Thank you. Okay, next subject, Mr. DeLuca, library construction project.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're moving forward. I have a couple of motions I'd like to make. We're going to go before the planning board on April 13th. I'd like to move to authorize Township Business Administrator Jerry Jimes to sign the planning board application.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lundberg,
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Mr. DeLuca.
Thank you. Second, we are looking to move the adult services of the library to the OEM building at 129 Boyden Ave. The children and teens operation will be at the Hilton branch of the library, and this will all occur towards the end of this year. We wanted to get a vote to authorize the library move to the OEM building. Now we have elections there. We will move the library stuff out of the room where the election is, and we will hold the election in that building. So the election will not change. It will still be at the OEM building. So all the material and equipment of the library will be moved into another room. We will set up the voting machines in that large room there, and they will continue to be, people continue to vote there as normal. So that will happen in November, and it will happen next year in June and November, and probably the following year in June. So whenever there's an election, the library will move out of that large room. So we've had a zoning review with Mr. Mendola. Everything is fine. So I'd like to move to authorize the township, authorize the library to move to the OEM building in September 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lundberg,
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen.
Okay, number 3, I just want to alert you to how the finances are going to work with the grant from the state. The money has to come from the state to the library as the grantee. Also, the money from the Library Foundation has to go to the library. We set up a finance team, Mr. Kaloje, Ms. Lester, Ms. Goldfein, myself. We discussed that we want all the bills to be paid out of one account, and that will be a township account. So the money from the state grant and the money from the library will come, Library Foundation will come to the library, then will be transferred to the township account, and bills will be paid out of the township account. And what will happen is the library board will approve the payment of the bills. First of all, Sarah Lester will approve the payment. It'll go to the library board. Then it will come to the town, and it'll be on the bill list for the township committee to approve. So we'll have a belt and suspenders thing here. Everybody approving it, and everything, all the bills will be paid out of one account that Mr. Kaloje will manage.
Understood. Any discussion regarding that? There's checks and balances there from my perspective.
Okay, and lastly, I just don't want anybody to freak out. We had a landscaping discussion. We put a team together, and we've had David Nile and Joanne Beckeridge, Jill Ryan. They've looked at plants there around the library that are going to have to be removed and replanted. So some of those plantings will, it's best to start removing them now in the spring, some in the summer, some in the fall. So you'll be seeing some plantings being moved there. I just didn't want anybody to freak if you get calls or emails about what's happening to the plants there. They're being moved to either the Hilton branch of the library grounds or other parks. And that's it.
But is there a but?
Is there what?
A but? Like,
no.
I thought there was a tree coming down, like that sort of iconic tree in front of the library. Is that coming down?
There is a plan to take a tree down, yes. It's right where the entrance is, and there's a concern about we have, it's an oak tree, and there are branches and stuff that fall on people now. So that tree has to be inspected by our arborist, and there has to be a determination made as whether or not it can come down, whether it's either damaged or presents a danger.
But does it interfere with the new construction, or is it just?
It does. It's right in the middle of the entrance. So everyone going into the building or coming out of the building will go underneath this tree. So
right.
There is some issue of danger there.
Well, there's a difference between, it's something we'll be talking about at Engineering Public Works too, but with regard to pruning and danger, danger can be removed by pruning, not necessarily removing. So.
Well, we're not taking the tree down now. That has to be decided. There has to be a tree permit done and all that.
Okay.
So that's it on the library.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. All right, we're moving on to agenda item, or discussion item rather, number 6. Mr. Limbrick, you're back up again. You're heavy.
I am, though. I'm definitely going to be looking for help on this one, particularly from my colleague, Deputy Mayor Daffis, and also from Ms. Desiderio. And this is, some changes proposed to the community board on police, some of which are in the draft ordinance that's been circulated by Ms. Desiderio for discussion tonight, and another of which was mentioned in an email to us from Ms. Scherzer, I guess now the vice chair of the community board on police. So the first, just to summarize, the first change that's in the ordinance revision circulated by Ms. Desiderio is to give the community board on police a role along with the police in reviewing internal affairs investigations. And that is actually to incorporate some guidance from the Attorney General's office that has evolved actually since we've created the community board on police. And I think Deputy Mayor Daffis will probably be in a better position to maybe speak on that in more detail. The other request from the Community Board on Police that Ms. Scherzer forwarded was that, as the public is able to review certain documents in an unredacted format, that the Community Board on Police, when they review documents, particularly now that they have a secure server set up for their review of documents, that they also be able to review those documents without redactions. So I think that that tees it up. So without going into more detail, I'll see whether Ms. Desiderio or Deputy Mayor Daffis would like to take the baton next.
I'd certify, I would, Daffis, please.
Okay, so basically two things here. We want to amend our charter. The proposal is to amend our charter so that our Community Board on Police, our Civilian Review Board, aligns with the new directive that was issued back in August of 2020 by the Attorney General regarding the powers that any civilian review board in New Jersey can have. Namely, that they can review an IA investigation only and only after it has been concluded. They cannot assert themselves before the investigation has concluded. They cannot assert themselves into discipline or any of that decision making. The IA process has to be concluded, and after that, the Civilian Review Board, or in our case, our Community Board on Police, would have the authority to look into what happened. Why would they want to do that? Well, because they can make recommendations, as they often do and have, about training. They can find officer training, obviously. They can find issues that need to be addressed as it relates to SOPs, operating procedures. And they can, as appropriate, obviously, have a better understanding of policing in the community and report back out into the community. They can also ask, they may ask for the IA investigation to be reopened, but they don't have the authority to do that. Only the chief of police has the final say in that regard. So essentially, once the investigation is concluded, the board would have the opportunity to take another look. That's it. Okay? This is something that's been granted to all civilian review boards in the state of New Jersey by the Attorney General. The Township Committee of Maplewood Township has agreed with the board having this, and we are now finally getting to the point of amending our charter to allow the board to do it. Now, the second piece here, which Mr. Lembrick mentioned, the second piece is, once we say yes to that, we have to make sure that everything else that we do aligns with that. Meaning what? If we're going to have access to review an IA investigation, which includes obviously access to confidential personnel records in an unredacted manner, the AG directive makes that clear, then that means that we also have to amend our charter, which currently says that the Community Board on Police shall have no access to personnel records and shall continue receiving all information from the deputy chief, in our case, Deputy Chief Sally, in a redacted manner. Again, we've had discussions about this as a governing body, and we've come to the conclusion after hearing from the department itself, from the police department, from both Chief Duvall and Deputy Chief Sally, that they support the Community Board, the board's access to records without redactions. It is currently overly burdensome to DC Sally to do so. It is inefficient. Anyone out there on the street, as Mr. Desiderio reminded us earlier, can do an Oprah and get those records unredacted. We started out this way because we wanted to build credibility with the police department and the union. We have done so. The Community Board on Police members have thus far reviewed many confidential records in the past couple of years, including body cam footage, and there's been no leaks and no breaks in the strict confidentiality that every member adheres to, signs, attests to, and has adhered to. So those are the two pieces. Amend the charter so we can have that power that now the Attorney General says we can, and amend the rest of our charter with respect to no redactions and access to personnel records so that the two things are consistent. Okay? Now, you may ask questions. I've sent you an email with the directive itself. I highlighted the pieces for you to make your homework easier as we came into this discussion tonight. So the follow-up questions are, has the Community Board on Police discussed the different measures that it has to have in place in order to have this authority? For instance, updating our confidentiality agreement so that every member understands what they can and can't do that. I've been assured by Community Board on Police Counsel Ian Grodman that that policy will be updated. Has the Community Board on Police decided on a confidential location where they can review these records? Again, Board Counsel Grodman and co-chairs Scherzer and Picarts have reported that they have come to a conclusion with our police department that such review would happen, as we say in the legal business, in camera, meaning at the police department, in person there, not allowed to take the records out, none of that. At the police department, you go there, you review everything, everything stays there, right? And has the Community Board on Police educated its board members about this, what it can and cannot do, and that those who will have access to this sort of IA review would have to undergo a criminal background check? That's another requirement in the directive, as I highlighted for you all. Again, Board Counsel Grodman has reported that all the board members are on board with this, fully educated, fully informed. Let's do this. Mr. Desiderio, anything to add?
I do not. All we need is the governing body to say, do it.
So I move that we amend the charter of Maplewood Township's Community Board on Police to incorporate by reference AG Directive 2020-7 regarding the authority of civilian review boards to review closed and completed IA investigations. And I move that we further amend the charter of the Community Board on Police to align with that, namely to no longer require redactions upon the receipt of records and to have access to personnel records accordingly.
Second.
So, just a point of order. So is this something, Mr. Desiderio, that we can do on first reading tonight, or is this something that we'll have to just put on for first reading on April 20th?
The latter. First reading April 20th, and then and the last consideration on May 4th.
Okay, so the motion tonight is really just seeking sort of the sentiment of the committee.
Correct.
All right, I will vote for this.
It's instructing Mr. Desiderio to draft the language.
Yeah.
Okay, I am a yes to that as well.
Any further discussion then? Hearing none, Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Mr. Lundberg,
Yes.
Mayor McGee.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Daffis, Mr. Limbrick, Desiderio. Mr. Daffis, that was a thorough document with all the highlights, yellow and red and bold and italicized. Appreciate it very much. And with
I would
that,
like you to use blue next time a little bit because it was a little redundant.
Okay.
Yellow.
Agreed.
the blue was, all the 9.33-11. All right, let's move on to discussion item number 7, which I will lead. The Finance Committee met on the 31st of March. We went through an assortment of challenges and scenarios where we are currently. Coming out of that meeting, we felt a sense of urgency regarding 3 issues. We asked Mr. Kaloje, along with Mr. Giles, to draft the memo, which you all received and hopefully read. It breaks out the 3 core issues that we need to discuss. We've actually discussed one of them already, so we're gonna truncate this to 2 issues, which is going to be 1 and 3, the special emergency note and the budgetary impact, and we'll touch on that one first. So basically, as we're aware, we will be receiving $2.4 million in federal funding. It has been noted per our bond counsel that this must be used to pay notes that were issued during the pandemic. And as a result of that, we looked at our pandemic-related cost. We had $2.8 million currently in costs. $1.8 million is in lost revenue, $240 in unreimbursed pandemic expenses, $180,000 in municipal operating loss, and a $600,000 pool operating loss. The recommendation when going over all these particular expense or line items of our CFO, our bond counsel, as well as the Finance Committee, is to take A, B, and D, A being the 1.8, B being the 240, and D being the 600, and to issue a special emergency note for $2.64 million. You take that $2.64 million and you subtract the $240.4 million, which is the funding from the federal government. It leaves it with a difference of approximately $200,000. What this does is this becomes, if you divide that by 5 years, starting in 2022, because as I said, this would be a note, it basically becomes a $40,000 budgetary requirement that we can offset by moving forward with this refunding bond. We will not see any impact on future budgets. Now, at that point, understand this is a key point to it, is that what this also does is position us currently, our fund balance is at $300,000 of what's unrestricted. With this process, we will increase our fund balance to $2.1 million, which gives us much more flexibility. Within that $2.1 million, the Finance Committee, in the great interest of reducing our tax rate for our 2021 budget, would like to utilize $1.3 million of that to reduce our tax rate, but still leaves us with $800,000 in unrestricted fund balance, which is a 2.6x increase where our fund balance would currently be. So it provides us with relief from a tax rate perspective. It also helps with offsetting costs in future budgets. If there are any questions, I'll open the floor, and Mr. Kaloje has stayed up to 10:30 for any additional questions. Any questions?
So I have just a couple things. One is we haven't accounted for any FEMA funds. We have not put in a request for any of the 2020 expenses that were not covered by CARES. And also we have 2021 expenses. For example, our sending the police officer up to Livingston 3 times a week and stuff. So we need to, I don't think it's going to affect your calculations, but I think we need to make sure that we get on that FEMA submission sooner rather than later. And then the second thing is there is some talk that the money that we're going to get in the rescue plan, the 2.6 or 2.4, whatever it's going to be, cannot be used to lower taxes. Is there any danger to what we're doing here that would be perceived that that money would be used to lower taxes?
Mr. Closer, you want to take that one?
Yes, sir. What the federal law was trying to prevent was people coming in with their money and essentially giving taxpayers a refund. So if we were at 82 cents this year, suddenly because of the money that we got in from ARP, we're now at 80 cents. That was the interpretation of the language put in place, because basically any money that we use from fund balance can be perceived as reducing the tax rate. But because we are still going to see a tax rate increase, both bond counsel and I don't think that that is going to be an issue for us.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any additional questions on this emergency note? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Kaloje, we will duly note that in terms of what we, and by the way, I forgot to mention that we have sufficient funds right now. So to issue this note, it's a 0% interest for us until we get the funding. So we are in a good financial position. All right, refunding bond, we already touched on that when we did the first passage of the ordinance. And since it's 10:30 tonight, we're gonna move on. All right, new bond issuance. Basically, long story short, is that our bond anticipation note, aka the band, right now, per your reading, it's at $16 million. Converting this $16 million band will do a couple of things. It will help us successfully avoid increasing our outstanding notes to 36 million. But the challenge that we have is that we have to get this in front of the local finance board, and that takes a process. So we're bringing it to you now because if we waited till the April 20th meeting, we would miss that deadline. So that's why we're trying to move forward with these financial documents so we can formally submit our application for that May meeting. And so that's why it's super critical. But essentially, if you look at resolution, I think it's 121. Is that right, Mr. Kaloje? Let me see if I have it. Yep, that's right, 100-21. So essentially here, what we're doing here is we are finding a way to address our current, because we're adopting ordinances of 20 million and have the 16 million to offset. So I think I explained that pretty clearly, but it's also in your notes. But you want to add anything else, Mr. Kaloje?
No, sir. We're just looking to ask for permission to get on the local finance board's agenda so that we can explore our options. Doesn't necessarily commit us to converting this $16 million bond, but we wouldn't be able to convert that bond in a non-conforming fashion unless we get permission. So all we're asking to do is go before the local finance board, ask for permission. We believe that we'll be successful in being able to do that. And then that would give us more options in terms of how we're going to deal with our refunding bond and how we're going to deal with a $16 million note that we would like to convert while we know interest rates are low.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that we do believe interest rates will go up. So this puts us in a strong position and not a reactionary position. So any further discussion?
Do we need to vote to authorize Mr. Kaloje to go before the local finance board?
That is a good question. Mr.
This resolution will allow both myself, the bond counsel, and our financial advisors to all attend the meeting via Zoom.
So this allows that to happen. Okay.
And this is resolution
100-21. Okay.
Correct. Awesome. Okay. That's it. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to discussion item number 8. Ms. Adams and myself, update on our waste consultants, RFP. Ms. Adams.
Sure. So as everyone knows, we approved up to $15,000, I believe, to fund a joint consultant or a consultant that we would share with South Orange. So Mayor and I have been in several meetings, and the committee, which is made up, just for everyone's edification, of the chairs of the Green Team and Environmental, of Maplewood and of South Orange, along with some of us from the governing body. And I think Mr. Kittner was involved as well. and the DPW director of South Orange. So it's just basically going over the scope of that each presented. There were about 5 who submitted proposals in response to the RFP. We narrowed that down to 3 who we interviewed through Zoom over the course of a couple days. And then 2 of those were still higher than the amount we had allocated from both towns to contribute. And 1 consultant was in line with that amount. That consultant also happened to be the favorite one of the majority of the committee. And as you saw in your email today, our chair of environmental advisory is very much opposed to that consultant. And we've talked with him a few times, and he has voiced his concerns with the committee. Because this is a joint venture, it's not necessarily, to be clear, that we will be going into some sort of shared service with regard to garbage and recycling going forward with South Orange. This is simply to get a consultant to help educate us, guide us, look at our options, see what's out there, see what we can do, give us direction, and try to set a path forward. And whether that path is independent of each other or together is way in the future to be determined. And as we know, we're getting 1 bid, and we for both recycling pickup and for our end user, which is just costing, and we're not the only town. All the towns are going through the same thing. So there's a higher level of issue here, but it's starting to get out of control where it's costing all of our taxpayers a lot of money. So we, I think Mayor and I both agree with going with zero waste industries, or whatever they're called, zero waste consultants, whatever. As the consultant to hire, and that would require no additional funds from either township, and to address concerns by the chair of environmental advisory. We would be working closely with this consultant, and to the extent that he's concerned that they would go off in a different direction, where they're working with him to say, no, we don't care about that issue. We want to deal with this issue. So I think we're going to be driving the bus, and hopefully we'll come out with, something relevant to address our escalating costs with regard to recycling in particular. And also there's a large push by all the firms we interviewed to deal with food waste, which is about 43% of the waste that is in America and in our towns. That is part of the garbage stream, and trying to address that with a better way. And in New Jersey in particular, all of this is much more difficult because we're so densely populated, and because in Maplewood in particular, we don't really have any space to do a lot of things. So there's a lot of challenges, and we're not sure this is going to help us, but we're hoping. And so I think that summarizes it.
Yeah, no, I think, Ms. Adams, I think you nailed on the head. I mean, there's been a lot of effort by many people in both towns, by, there's not the environment, but our Tracy Woods has been phenomenal. Bill Haskins, so many key stakeholders, both electeds and not, in looking at these RFPs, questions, sitting in presentations. Look, this is an upward climb, but zero waste has performed quite well in terms of their RFP questions, in terms of their presentation. We feel like this is the right way to go. From a cost perspective, it aligns with what we want to do in terms of a pilot perspective. And look, the onus is going to be on us once we move forward to work with them and to really make sure that we stay on top of them to move forward with the action items which we outlined. So if we're going to make a difference, it starts now. Because yes, the cost, the education, the enforcement, a lot of things, there are a lot of challenges ahead. If we're going to become a more sustainable community collectively with South Orange, or even if we move forward our separate ways at different phases. Right now, we need to be together and need to work together on this. So I'm hoping that, as Ms. Adams said, you all will agree with us and move forward tonight with zero waste.
I want to thank you both for all your work on this. This is very technical and not easy. And it could seem like there are no options. But I like what Ms. Adams said about, as it relates to some of the concerns that we heard about by email earlier. You know, we are driving the bus here, so we can make sure that, you know, this consulting goes in the direction that we collectively want them to go. And on the food waste side, composting, we'll be talking about that in engineering and public works more, but you know, composting, that's the only solution. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Daffis.
Look, I don't know if this is gonna help us, but you know, at least we can look into it and see what we can do. I think ultimately we need to get our state legislators to take this issue up, because it's all across the country, whether or not all the firms agree that they're not going to bid on certain towns and that's why we get one bid, or they're all owned by the same people. I don't know. I don't care, but it needs to be addressed. And because it's costing us all a fortune, and it's environmentally awful as well. And environmental justice aspect of it is awful as well. There's nothing good about it, the way it's functioning now. And, you know, to the extent that we can expose it or maybe go in a different direction or try and get, maybe, I mean, sort of like leaf blowers, you know, I'm constantly on calls about that. And eventually it's going to end up going to the state because every municipality is discussing it, because it's an issue for our environment, our health, and and environmental justice and social justice with the workers who are wearing them. So I think, you know, garbage is not much different with where it impacts those who are, you know, disadvantaged economically. So.
Hey, garbage is gold. I mean, that's really what it is. Garbage is gold. Okay. I think we're good. I don't see anyone else. I know it's getting late. All right, so we'll take that as.
I hate to do this, Mayor, but Ms. Adams, are you asking the governing body to do anything relative to this?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
We don't hate you, Roger. We'd rather have the conversation now than have to have it later. Okay, thank you, Ms. Adams. All right, we'll move on to our agenda item number 18, which is the consent agenda. I'm looking for a motion for 1 through 20 and 22 through 24.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we adopt items 1 through 20 and 22 through 24 of the consent agenda.
I get a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Fritzen, please call the roll.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mr. Lemberg?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Okay, we're now at agenda item number 19, public comment on any subject matter. Looks like we have one comment from Ms. Solowski.
There she is.
I just wanted to clarify from the discussion earlier. I know there were some questions about what rec desks can do. Mr. Walls has become rather familiar with rec desk. I think he can answer every one of the questions that was raised tonight in terms of how information is collated and separated, as well as how the questions are asked. Rec desk already has that. He has gotten all the information on it. He's done a very good job of getting all of this information. So I think all of the questions that you may have, the department can already answer. And I would be very, very hopeful that this can be implemented very soon, given how long this has gone on. And I just lastly want to say that I agree with Mr. Daffis that the LGBTQ community, that those questions should be asked as well. And I think, you know, sometimes it's assumed that a household is therefore representative of how someone identifies, and that contributes to the invisibility of certain populations. particularly including bisexuals. It's assumed that whomever one is married to is how they identify as either straight or gay, and it results in erasure, complete erasure for some people. And so again, also as people appear to present is sometimes how one assumes their gender is identified. So I think asking those questions really does make sure that we reach all populations. And again, I really appreciate your time tonight in dealing with this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Slawski, and have a great evening.
I love that cat.
Yeah, what is it looking
I am not a cat. That was the best.
Scary cat.
All right. Nick, do we have anyone else who would like to address the TC?
No, Mayor, you guys are all set.
Great, thank you. We'll now close our second and final public comment for this evening, and I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think we need to move into closed session though.
Yeah, I move we adjourn and move into closed session for purposes of personnel.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
So what are we gonna, how are we gonna do this?
Mayor, I know, I hate to tell you, but I'm going to read one statement.
Well, we're still live on YouTube, by the way.
Richard, do you, for two things. Number one, Mr. Mayor, do you need me to come back in a closed session?
No, Mr. Desiderio, you'll be okay.
And number two, how, as Mr. DeLuca was just going to ask, how are you going to do this? Via Zoom?
That link, I think the link that we use for close should still be live.
Yeah, it should work. If not, I can just email everybody a new one.
Yeah, so go back to that first link for closed.
Okay, Mrs. Fritzen, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, Mayor, I want to just read the one statement.
Okay, fair enough.
Whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975 permits the exclusion of the public from meeting in certain circumstances, whereas this public body is of the opinion that such